By the time Eli saw what his family had left him, Grant was standing in waist-high burdock with a pair of bolt cutters. "There," Grant said, snapping the rusted chain from the barn door. "Now you've got access." The door leaned inward without being touched. Above it, the roof sagged like a wet cardboard box, one entire slope crushed beneath last winter's snow. A maple sapling grew through the missing boards on the west wall. Beth shoved her hands into her coat pockets. "It has character." Grant laughed. Eli always liked broken things. The laugh Beth gave him was small and automatic, but it landed cleanly. A truck door slammed behind them. Mara Voss crossed the field in work boots and a faded green jacket, her dark hair shoved through the back of a cap. Raymond Mercer's apprentice looked older than Eli remembered, and more familiar than she had any right to. She stopped 10 feet from the wreck, studying the roofline. Grant held up the bolt cutters. "I told you to take whatever equipment's still worth taking before it comes down." Mara ignored him. She crouched beside the foundation, scraped moss from a stone, then looked through the broken doorway. "This barn isn't coming down." Grant smiled at Eli. "She always talks like that." "No." Mara rose slowly. "I mean, it isn't dead." Eli stared at the ruined building, then at the woman his father had taught to see things he had never taught his own son to see. "How would you know?" he asked. Mara's eyes moved to him. For a moment, she looked almost guilty. "Because your father and I talked about what it could become." 2 hours earlier, Eli had arrived at the Mercer farmhouse with one duffel bag, a stiff neck, and a coffee he had been making last since White River Junction. The house looked smaller than it had when he left 7 years ago. The white paint had grayed, one shutter hung lower than the other. Raymond used to say he would fix it when the weather broke, as though weather in northern Vermont were a temporary inconvenience. Eli parked his 12-year-old Honda behind Beth's Subaru. Grant's truck occupied the gravel circle in front of the porch, exactly where Raymond had always parked, its nose pointed toward the road, for a fast departure nobody in the family had ever witnessed. Grant opened the front door before Eli knocked. "You made it." It was not quite a welcome and not quite an accusation. Grant had put on weight through the shoulders and lost it around the face. At 34, he had begun resembling Raymond in the least flattering ways: the tight mouth, the measuring look, the habit of keeping one hand in a pocket as if conversation might charge by the minute. "Road was clear," Eli said. "You could have stayed here. You said the guest room was full, Lacey storing linens in there, so I stayed at the motel." Grant frowned as if Eli had done this extravagantly. The motel had cost $89, which Eli had calculated 6 times before handing over his debit card. That left him with $1,100 and change, assuming the cabinet shop's last paycheck never appeared. Nobody at Holcomb Custom had answered a phone in 9 days. From the kitchen, Beth called, "If you two are going to have the same conversation you've had since 2008, come have it where the coffee is." She stood at the sink in a camel-colored sweater, washing a mug that was already clean. At 30, Beth possessed the family talent for looking busy during discomfort. She kissed Eli's cheek, held his shoulders for half a second, and said, "You look tired. You look expensive. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me." He smiled despite himself. On the kitchen table sat 3 manila folders, a yellow legal pad, and Raymond's red ceramic sugar bowl. The bowl had a chipped lid that only fit if turned a certain way. Eli reached automatically to straighten it. Grant noticed. "We've been sorting all week. I can see that." The room had been thinned. Raymond's Windsor chairs were gone, replaced by folding chairs from the church basement. The cast iron pans no longer hung beside the stove. Even the old wall clock was missing, leaving a pale circle above the doorway. "Where's the clock?" "Lacey liked it," Grant said. "It belonged with the house." Eli put his duffel beside the pantry. Beth slid a mug toward him. "Sit down before Grant starts saying practical every third word. I say it when it applies. You said my taking the syrup pans was practical, then made a face for 20 minutes. I had gas. That was not a gas face." For a few minutes, they managed to sound like siblings. Beth complained about the probate inventory. Grant complained about fuel prices. Eli stirred sugar into coffee he did not want, because his hands needed something ordinary to do. Raymond had been dead 6 weeks. A clot had traveled to his lungs on a Tuesday morning while he was sitting in a hospital chair, refusing to put on the gown because it opened in the back. Beth had been there. Grant arrived 40 minutes later. Eli learned by voicemail after his shift. He had listened to Beth say, He's gone, beside a stack of half-finished cabinet doors. Then his foreman asked if he could still finish the day because they were behind. Eli had. He had also missed the small family service 3 days later. He told Beth the car needed a water pump. That was true. It was not the reason. Grant opened the first folder. The simplest thing is the division we discussed. I take the house and the debt attached to it. Beth takes the north acreage and the sugar setup. You take the rear parcel. The barn, Eli said. The parcel, Grant corrected. It's 1.8 acres, with a collapsed barn, with road access through the lower track. Beth stared into her coffee. Eli opened his folder. A survey map showed the family property divided into shapes that made sense only if you already knew which ones had value. Beth's land spread green and broad along the northern slope. Grant's wrapped around the house, garage, pond, and main road. Eli's was a bent strip at the back, narrowed by ledge on one side and marshy ground on the other. The barn appeared as a small black rectangle with a diagonal line through it. Who drew the line? Eli asked. The surveyor, Grant said. No, the diagonal line? Oh, that means compromised structure. It means ruined, Beth said quietly. Grant leaned back. The house needs $60,000 of work, minimum. The maple lines are old, and half the south stand is sick. Nobody's getting handed a prize here. You got Dad's truck. I need it for the house. And the joiner? Grant's jaw moved once. We divided the shop equipment before the funeral. Convenient. You weren't here. There it was, set carefully on the table between them. Beth touched the rim of her mug. We tried calling. I know. We didn't know when you were coming. I said I'd come. You said maybe Friday, Grant replied. Then Saturday. Then nothing. Eli looked around the kitchen. The clock, the pans, the chairs, the bare hooks near the mudroom where Raymond's coats had hung. It was amazing how quickly a life could be converted into things people had already carried away. What's left in the barn? Rot, mostly, Grant said. Some clamps, a bench grinder that got wet. Mara's checking it today. At her name, Eli stopped turning the map. Beth glanced at Grant. You didn't tell him? Tell me what? Mara's been around. Doing what? Helping inventory Dad's shop, Grant said. She knows the tools. Of course she did. The last time Eli had seen Mara Voss, she had been 25 and standing at Raymond's bench with her sleeves rolled above her elbows. Raymond had been behind her, one broad hand guiding the angle of her chisel. His voice had been low, almost kind. Don't force it. Let the edge tell you when it's seated. Eli had stood in the doorway holding a walnut panel with a gouge across its face. Raymond had taken one look and said, What did you do now? Eli could still remember Mara lowering the chisel. She had not smiled or looked pleased. That would have been easier to hate. He closed the folder. So that's it? Grant spread his hands. It's the fairest version. Beth flinched before Eli did. Don't, she said. What? Call it fair like that settles it. I'm taking on the mortgage. You're also renting half the house. Lacey has a business plan. She has 4 sets of matching towels and an Instagram account. Grant looked genuinely offended. They're Turkish cotton. Eli let out a short laugh. Beth covered hers with a cough. For 1 second, Grant looked as though he might laugh too. Then his face closed. You want the house? He asked Eli. Take the payments. Take the furnace that quits twice a winter. Take Dad's medical bills and the property taxes. I'm not robbing anybody. Eli looked at the survey again. I didn't say you were. You're making the face. What face? Dad's face. The one where everybody's guilty and he's the only one too dignified to say why. That did it. Eli stood so quickly his folding chair scraped backward. Don't compare me to him. Grant's shoulders dropped, not in surrender, but fatigue. Fine. Beth said his name softly, but Eli picked up the folder and walked outside. They followed because Mercers could let a man leave for 7 years, but not cross a yard alone. The lower track began behind the garage and ran past the pond, where October leaves floated against the reeds in copper-colored mats. Grant talked as they walked, listing boundary markers, drainage problems, and the cost of demolishing the barn. Beth occasionally corrected him. Eli said nothing. The barn appeared through the trees all at once. His first thought was that it looked worse than the photograph Grant had sent. His second was that it still smelled the same. Even from the doorway, beneath wet leaves and mildew, Eli caught pine shavings, old oil, mouse droppings, and the mineral scent of sharpening stones. The smell reached through 7 years and put him at 19 again, standing with his ruined walnut panel while Raymond examined the cut as if it revealed a defect deeper than carelessness. Grant cut the chain. Beth made her comment about character. Then Grant made his joke, and Mara arrived. Now she stood beside the broken foundation, saying Raymond had spoken to her about the barn. Eli stepped closer. When? Mara brushed dirt from her fingers. On and off, for years. Years. Eli, Beth warned. He ignored her. He told you he wanted to rebuild this? Mara looked through the doorway rather than at him. Not rebuild it exactly. Grant tossed the cut chain into the weeds. Here we go. Mara walked to the west corner. She pressed the toe of her boot against the base of a huge vertical post, then pointed upward where the post disappeared beneath a fallen roof truss. The siding is gone. Rafters are mostly gone. Roof's a total loss. But those central bents are chestnut, and they're protected better than they look. Your father repaired this sill. Grant squinted. That rotten thing? Behind it. She pulled a folding knife from her pocket and pried loose a strip of blackened wood. Beneath it lay a darker, solid beam fitted over the stone. He sistered new oak inside the old sill and reset this whole corner. Probably 12 years ago. Beth stared. Why would he do that and not fix the roof? Because your father could spend 2 months doing the part nobody saw and lose interest before buying shingles. A laugh escaped Beth, warm and startled. Even Grant's mouth twitched. Eli did not laugh. Mara had said your father, but she had known exactly how Raymond worked. She stepped through the crooked doorway. Don't, Eli said. Mara looked back. The roof could shift. It could. She handed him her knife. So watch the north brace. Then she disappeared into the barn, as if Raymond had asked her to fetch something. Eli stood outside with her knife in his palm, furious at the familiarity of the order. After a moment, he ducked beneath the fallen door and followed her. Inside, the light changed from gray to brown. It came through gaps in the siding in long, dusty blades, enough to show the old threshing floor under a blanket of leaves and splintered roofing. A section of corrugated metal hung overhead, ticking whenever the wind touched it. The central aisle was blocked by a fallen rafter thick as Eli's thigh. Mara stood just beyond it with her head tilted back. North brace, she said. I'm watching it. You're watching me. The brace isn't likely to do something stupid on purpose. She glanced over her shoulder. You've gotten friendlier. You've gotten comfortable trespassing. It's not trespassing if the owner follows you in. The word owner sounded absurd in there. Eli stepped over a broken plank. Something shifted under his boot, and Mara's hand shot out, catching his jacket. A square of floorboard tipped into blackness. Manure trough, she said. Could have mentioned that. I thought you remembered. I was never allowed in this bay. Her grip loosened, but she did not let go immediately. Then she seemed to notice her hand on him and withdrew it. Outside, Grant called. If this kills both of you, I'm not doing 2 services. Beth said, You'd combine them to save on flowers. Absolutely. Mara moved toward the first frame, testing each board before putting her weight on it. Eli followed more carefully. The chestnut post rose out of the gloom, broad enough that he could not have wrapped both arms around it. Its surface was silvered and scarred by adze marks. Raymond used to run his fingertips over old tool marks the way other people read inscriptions. Mara brushed away a curtain of cobwebs. Here, at shoulder height, a new oak peg stood pale against the ancient chestnut. Higher up, a repaired crack had been stitched with a fitted block that nearly vanished into the grain. Eli reached for it before he could stop himself. He did that? We did. The answer pressed between his ribs. When? First winter I worked here. You were fixing the barn that long ago? We fixed a joint. That's not the same thing. You said he talked about rebuilding. I said he talked about what it could become, which is a very dramatic way of not answering me. She folded her arms. He thought the frame could be taken down, repaired on the ground, and raised at a smaller footprint. 3 bents instead of 5. Shop in front, storage in back. Maybe a classroom along the east wall if there was ever money. A classroom. He liked the idea of teaching here. Eli looked at the pale peg. I bet he did. Mara heard what he meant. Her eyes lowered to the joint. From the doorway, Beth called, Is it safe? No, Mara and Eli said together. Beth stayed where she was. Mara crouched near the foot of the post. The frames twisted, but most of that happened after the western rafters failed. The chestnut may straighten once the weight is off, and if it doesn't, you work with what it gives you. It was almost word for word something Raymond would have said. Eli handed her knife-back handle first. How much are the timbers worth? Grant appeared in the doorway at once, as if the word worth had pulled him in by the collar. Mara looked from one brother to the other. As salvage? Yes, Eli said. Depends on condition after dismantling. Ballpark. I don't give ballparks inside structures that are trying to lie down. Grant put one boot over the threshold. Stay there, she told him. He stopped, annoyed enough to obey. Mara scraped a thumbnail over the chestnut. Old timber has value, but it costs money to get it out without ruining it. Rigging, labor, storage. You might clear enough to pay for demolition and hauling. Maybe a little more if several pieces come out clean. Grant's interest faded. So, nobody's getting rich, Eli said, not from selling beams. The distinction sat there. A gust pushed against the barn. The hanging metal clattered, and dust sifted down. Mara caught Eli by the sleeve again and pulled him beneath the line of the intact bent. The fallen roof creaked, settled, and held. Eli's heart beat hard enough to make his vision jump. Mara did not seem frightened until the sound stopped. Then she exhaled through her nose. That, she said, was the building voting us out. They retreated one careful step at a time. Grant moved away from the door, but Beth remained close enough to catch Mara's elbow as she ducked through. Eli emerged last. The open field felt startlingly bright. Grant pointed at the roof. And your professional recommendation is that this isn't dead. My professional recommendation is that nobody goes inside again until it's braced. That's not the same sentence. No, it's the sentence an insurance company would prefer. Grant took out his phone. I've got a demolition guy who can come next week. Eli wiped dust from his palms. You already called somebody? I called for a number. Before I agreed to the parcel, you said on the phone you didn't care. I said I didn't care what I got. Grant's face tightened. How is that different? Eli could not explain it without sounding childish. He had meant there was nothing in the estate that could repair what mattered. Grant had heard permission to take the good chairs. Mara walked around the southern wall, studying where the collapsed roof had spilled into tall grass. Beth followed her. Grant remained with Eli, phone in hand. The responsible thing is to take it down, he said more quietly. If you leave it, somebody gets hurt. You'll be liable. Who's coming all the way back here? People do dumb things. Apparently they bring bolt cutters. Grant looked toward the house. You think I enjoyed sorting all that? I think you started early. Dad was dying for months, Eli. The roof was still leaking. Taxes were still due. Beth and I didn't get to freeze time until you decided to answer. The anger in his voice had something rough beneath it. Eli had expected Grant to be smug. Smug would have been easier. I answered Beth. 3 days later, I was working. So was I. Eli looked at his brother's clean jacket, then hated himself for doing it. Grant saw. Say it. I didn't say anything. That's Dad's trick, too. Grant walked toward the barn before Eli could answer. Near the eastern doors, he pulled aside a warped sheet of plywood and exposed a narrow storage alcove. Rusted garden tools leaned beside a stack of wooden hand screws. Several long iron bar clamps hung from spikes, protected by the overhang. There, he called to Mara. That's what I meant. Take whatever you can use. Mara came around the corner, Beth behind her. Those aren't mine, Mara said. They're just going to rust. Grant lifted one of the hand screws from its spike. Its jaws were dark maple, polished at the handles from decades of use. Eli recognized it. Raymond had used that clamp on the first table Eli ever helped assemble, back when helping meant standing on a milk crate and handing over glue brushes. One handle still bore a stripe of blue paint from the time Eli dropped it into an open can. Put it back, he said. Grant looked over. What? The clamp. Put it back. Grant gave the screw a disbelieving shake. You want this? I want you to put it back. 6 weeks of restraint gathered in the field. Beth took a step toward them, then stopped. Mara said nothing. Grant placed the clamp against the wall, not on its spike. Eli picked it up and rehung it. There are maybe 20, Grant said. Half are seized. Then there are 20 seized clamps. Yesterday you didn't know they were here. Yesterday you hadn't given me the barn. I'm trying to keep useful equipment from rotting. On my parcel. Grant's lips parted. For the first time that day, he seemed to understand that the division might work in more than one direction. "Fine," he said. "They're yours." He walked away carrying the bolt cutters. Beth watched him go. "Those are from the garage." Grant did not turn around. "Put them on my tab." She looked at Eli. "He's been awful since Dad died. He had a head start." "That's true." She touched the blue-striped clamp. "You did that, didn't you?" Eli nodded. "Dad complained about that blue paint for 20 years. He could have sanded it off." "I know. He never did." Beth followed Grant toward the house, leaving Eli with the barn and the woman who knew its joints. Mara began pulling loose boards from the storage alcove. She sorted them into 2 piles without asking permission. "What are you doing?" "Making sure your clamps stay dry. I haven't decided I'm keeping anything. Then the next owner of 20 C's clamps will appreciate it." He leaned against the siding, which moved enough beneath his shoulder to make him stand straight again. Mara worked quickly. She had always been narrow and strong, but the years had settled her movements. Raymond used to rush through anger and slow down around wood. Mara was the reverse. With people, she seemed to brace for impact. Put a damaged board in her hands and she became calm. "You knew he was sick," Eli said. The board she held paused in midair. "Yes." "Did you see him?" "No." "Why not?" She set the board on the discard pile. "That's not a 5-minute conversation. I paid $89 for a motel. I've got time." One corner of her mouth moved, though nothing about her eyes did. "He called me in March," she said. "Wanted help with a job. I said no." "Because?" "Because I wasn't working for him anymore. He told Grant you were still his apprentice. He told everyone that." Raymond thought apprentice was a permanent medical condition. Eli almost smiled. Mara lifted another board. Behind it, a row of shallow shelves appeared. On the middle one sat a coffee tin filled with drill bits, 2 chalk lines, a cracked wooden mallet, and a carpenter's pencil sharpened at both ends. She picked up the pencil, stared at it, then put it back. "He called again in May," she said. "He didn't mention being sick. He talked for 20 minutes about this building. Said the old frame was wasted holding up a roof nobody would save. And you knew what he meant. I knew what he was saying. Must have been nice." This time she looked directly at him. "No," she said. "It wasn't." The answer was too sharp to dismiss. Eli watched her pull the final board free. Behind it, protected from rain, someone had marked the interior siding in pencil. Measurements ran vertically beside a crude rectangle, 16 feet, 24 feet, 10-foot door. There were no plans, only arithmetic, corrections, and a few abbreviated notes in Raymond's blocky hand. Bench light, stove, room to turn frame. Eli stepped closer. Mara did not touch the writing. "He never got farther than this," she said. "You said shop in front, storage in back. He talked more than he built near the end. Why didn't you help him? Because some offers arrived 7 years too late." He heard the number. Mara walked out of the alcove and brushed dust from her jacket. Her truck sat near the tree line, with a flatbed trailer hitched behind it. Under a canvas tarp, 2 enormous arched doors lay on padded blocks, their paint blistered white and gold. "What are those?" Eli asked. "Street. Luke's side doors. Wind caught one in August and pulled the other off square. They need to be apart, repaired, and rehung before Thanksgiving." "Your shop can't hold them?" "My shop is a rented garage with a landlord who thinks 8 feet is the same as 10. He looked from the doors to the one standing bay at the eastern end of the barn. Mara followed his eyes. "That bay can be stabilized," she said. "Not restored. Stabilized. We clear it, brace the standing bent, put a temporary roof over 20 feet. I do the door job here. With what money? I already have the deposit. I pay you labor out of it. I don't know historic restoration. You know cabinet work. You heard about Holcomb? Your father mentioned it." Of course he had. "The shop closed," Eli said. "I'm not taking a vacation." "I didn't say you were. I might sell the beams, then learn how to remove boards without destroying what's behind them. You make everything sound simple." "No." Mara looked at the fallen roof. "I make it sound possible. People confuse those all the time." A cold drop struck Eli's cheek. Another darkened the shoulder of Mara's jacket. Across the field, Grant had reached the farmhouse without looking back. Beth stood by her Subaru, watching them. Eli touched the handle of the blue-striped clamp. "How long to brace one bay?" "If the weather holds and you do what I say." 4 days. And if I don't do what you say, longer, but probably more entertaining. Rain began tapping against the surviving strip of roof. Eli looked at Raymond's measurements inside the alcove, then at the doors on Mara's trailer. "Show me what has to move first," he said. Mara pointed to a heap of warped siding near the east wall. "That moves." "Where?" "Somewhere it can't fall on us." "Very precise." She pointed to a patch of grass 20 yards from the barn. "There." Artistically. They worked until the rain thickened from taps to a steady drumming. Anything solid went into a salvage stack. Anything soft enough to break by hand went into another. Nails came out and dropped into a white bucket. Mara insisted on that, after Eli tossed one bent nail into the grass. "You planning to reuse it?" he asked. "I'm planning not to kneel on it. That's a personal preference. I'm fussy about puncture wounds." She handed him a pry bar and showed him where to place it so the old boards lifted without splitting. Eli had spent 6 years building cabinets from kiln-dried stock that arrived flat, labeled, and square. Nothing in the barn was square. The nails bent backward, boards that looked rotten held fast, while healthy-looking pieces disintegrated under his fingers. By the end of an hour, his shoulders burned, and they had cleared 6 feet. Mara checked her watch. "We're done." "You said 4 days." "I said if the weather held. This is Vermont. If rain stops work, nobody builds anything. If stupidity stopped work, nobody would either. We're still stopping." She covered the clamps with the driest boards, wrapped the church doors more securely, and drove away with the flatbed bouncing behind her. Eli stood under what remained of the overhang, listening to rain fall through the broken roof. He had imagined a negotiation, perhaps a handshake. Instead, he had been hired by a woman who had not stated his pay and had left him holding a pry bar. He carried the tool to his car. His duffel lay on the back seat. Beneath it was a motel receipt, a gas station sandwich wrapper, and the envelope containing his last $200 in cash. He checked his banking app. $1,138. The motel would take another 89 by 7 if he kept the room. He called the number on Holcomb Customs' website. The recorded message said the mailbox was full. On the 4th try that week, it had begun to sound personal. The farmhouse kitchen light came on across the field. For a moment, Eli considered walking up and asking Grant if the couch was available. Then he pictured the pale circle where the wall clock had been and Lacey's Turkish towels stacked in his old room. He drove back to the motel. At 6 the next morning, Mara was already beside the barn, boiling water on a small camp stove. She held out a metal cup. "What is it?" "Coffee. It looks like ditch water." "You want cream?" "Do you have cream?" "No." He took it. Then why ask? "To understand your expectations." The rain had passed, leaving every blade of grass jeweled and cold. Mara had unloaded 6 adjustable steel posts, coils of rope, 2 heavy bottle jacks, and enough lumber to build what looked like a small, ugly bridge. Eli set down a paper bag from the bakery in town. "I brought food." "What kind?" "Maple donuts." "That's not food. You made coffee in a saucepan." She took a donut. Before they touched the barn, Mara walked him around the standing bay. She made him identify every load path from roof to rafter, rafter to plate, plate to post, post to sill, and sill to stone. "That one," he said, pointing to a diagonal brace. "What does it do?" "Stops the frame from racking." "And right now, it's cracked, so?" "So, the frame can rack." "Good." "That's not good." "It's good you saw it." Raymond had taught differently. He asked questions that contained traps, then waited for Eli to step into them. Mara asked the same kind of questions, but when he answered wrong, she showed him where his thinking had turned. The distinction irritated him, because it should not have mattered as much as it did. They built temporary supports outside first, driving braces into the damp earth and tying them back to the standing frame. Mara made Eli retie 2 knots. "The second one would hold," he said, until it didn't. "Profound." "You want profound? Hire a poet." "You want that plate off your head? Tie it again." At 10, Beth arrived carrying a cardboard tray of coffee. Mara raised her cup. "We're supplied." Beth peered into it. "That's not coffee. That's a threat." She had changed out of yesterday's sweater into jeans, rubber boots, and an old blue coat Eli remembered from high school. She handed him a proper coffee and looked over the cleared section. "You did all this?" "Mostly Mara. That's not what I asked." Eli drank. Beth wandered to the pile of salvage siding and picked up a board. What can I do? Mara gave her a pair of pliers and pointed at the nail bucket. Beth looked at Eli. She's bossy. You should have heard Dad talk about her. Mara tightened a rope without looking up. I heard plenty. Beth's smile faded. She knelt beside the boards. The three of them worked through the morning with an ease Eli did not trust. Beth told Mara about Lacey's plans for the farmhouse, including a proposed sign that said Mercer House in a typeface Grant called Heritage. What does Heritage look like in a typeface? Mara asked. Apparently all the letters are tired. Eli laughed while holding a brace, which made Mara glare at him because she was measuring. Grant arrived just before noon. He stood at the edge of the work area, taking in the ropes, posts, and piles. What's all this costing? Nothing yet, Eli said. Mara stepped down from a ladder. I'm covering materials against shop use. Grant looked at the church doors. So, you're running a business here. I'm doing one job, on his property. Eli lowered his end of the brace. You've become very interested in my property. I'm interested in liability. We're not using that word before lunch, Beth said. New rule? Grant ignored her. If a customer comes back here and gets hurt, no customers, Mara said. We take the doors off site to hang them. Still. She looked at him in the direct, unblinking way that made contractors twice her size reconsider their tone. The unstable area is flagged. The standing bay will be temporarily supported. Nobody enters without me. If that changes, I stop. Grant turned to Eli. And you're paying her? She's paying me. That surprised him. It surprised Beth too, though she hid it by dropping a nail into the bucket. How much? Grant asked. Eli looked at Mara. 22 an hour, she said. He had earned 20 at Holcomb. You didn't tell me that. You didn't ask. Grant put both hands on his hips. Does Lacey know you're staying at the motel? The question had no logical connection, which meant Grant had been saving it. Eli's grip tightened on the brace. Why? Because there's a camper behind the equipment shed. Dad used it during sugaring when the house got crowded. Beth looked up. That thing has mice. So does the motel. The motel has decorative mice, Eli said. They fold the towels. Grant did not smile. You're burning money to make a point. I'm paying for a room. You've got a place here. In Lacey's linen closet? In the camper. The offer was too graceless to accept easily and too useful to reject. How much? Eli asked. For God's sake, nothing. Then why didn't you say yesterday? Grant looked toward the farmhouse. Yesterday, you were acting like everything I said was an attack. Was I wrong? Yes, Grant said, then added, not every time. He walked away before Eli could decide what to do with that. Beth waited until he was out of earshot. The camper smells like squirrels and Dad's feet. Selling it. But the stove works, buying it back. Mara climbed the ladder again. Can the housing debate wait until this brace is fastened? Beth saluted with the pliers. At 5, Mara paid Eli in cash from an envelope she kept zipped inside her jacket. $176. She counted it into his hand without ceremony. You're paying me for lunch? You ate in 12 minutes. I thought you were opposed to the donuts. I'm opposed to many enjoyable things. Take the money. He folded the bills into his wallet. It was the first pay he had received in 3 weeks. The relief was humiliatingly physical. His stomach loosened. The ache behind his eyes eased. Mara noticed, which made it worse. I can give you 2 more full days, she said. After that, door work has to start. What if the bay isn't ready? Then I rent space somewhere and lose the deposit to overhead. So you're betting on this. I'm making a calculated mistake. That's comforting. I have references. The camper sat behind the old equipment shed, hemmed in by goldenrod. One tire was flat. Moss covered the aluminum roof, and a pine cone had lodged in the vent cap. Eli opened the door and was hit by the smells Beth promised. Old wool, mouse nest, propane, and a human foot long since departed. Inside were 2 narrow bunks, a fold-down table, a brown plaid bench, and a stove with 3 knobs. Raymond's green thermos stood in the sink. Eli picked it up. The lid squeaked in the exact way he remembered. On the table lay a deck of cards bound with a rubber band and a grocery receipt from 3 years earlier. Coffee, bacon, lamp oil, peanut brittle. Raymond claimed not to like peanut brittle, But Eli had found wrappers in the truck every winter since he could remember. Does the door lock? Mara stood outside, one hand on the frame. From the inside. That feels important. You staying? One night, if something bites me, I'm setting it on fire. The animal or the camper. I'll decide based on size. She came in far enough to test the stove. The first burner clicked but did not light. The second caught with a blue flame. Luxury, she said. Her shoulder nearly touched his in the narrow aisle. Eli moved toward the table, and she reached past him for the thermos. Your father carried this everywhere. He said disposable cups made coffee taste like plastic. He also drank coffee that had been sitting in a truck for 9 hours. Principles don't require consistency. Mara ran her thumb over a dent in the thermos. You can use my sleeping bag, she said. It's in the truck. I have a coat. It'll be 38 tonight. I have 2 coats. She looked at him. Taking help is not the same as losing an argument. In this family, it usually comes with a scorecard. I'm not your family. The words were simple. They should have made things easier. She set the thermos in the sink and stepped outside. Eli found mouse droppings in both bunks, a dead flashlight in a drawer, and a wool blanket that smelled too strongly of Raymond to unfold. He cleaned until darkness covered the field and the farmhouse windows glowed in the distance. Mara returned with the sleeping bag, a battery lantern, and a can of soup. I can buy food, then buy some tomorrow. She left before he could refuse any of it. The wind rose after midnight. Eli lay awake in the upper bunk, listening to acorns strike the camper roof. The barn groaned across the field. Each sound brought an image of the standing bay folding inward, Mara's steel posts punching through the floor, the church doors buried beneath old chestnut. He pulled on his boots and went outside with the lantern. The braces held under the moving light. Rope lines hummed in the wind, taut but steady. Rain had started again, blowing under the roof. Eli walked the perimeter as Mara had shown him, checking each anchor without entering. At the east corner, water ran toward the exposed sill. He found a shovel, cut a shallow channel through the mud, and diverted it downslope. Then he dragged a tarp over the clamp alcove and weighted it with boards. When Mara's truck rolled in at 6, he was asleep at the camper table with wet socks beside the stove and a page of measurements under his arm. She read the page before waking him. You missed an anchor, she said. Eli opened one eye. Good morning to you, too. But you caught the drainage. He sat up, neck aching. Outside, the standing bay waited in the blue light, ugly and braced from 3 directions. Mara set 2 fresh coffees on the table. Today, she said, we find out whether you can follow directions while operating a jack. And if I can't, we find out how fast I can run. The jack did not look capable of lifting anything larger than a pickup. Mara positioned it beneath a temporary post, then set a steel plate between the post and the sagging beam. We're not trying to make it level, she said. We're taking enough weight off the damaged brace to replace it. How much is enough? You'll hear it. That's not a measurement. No, it's wood. Eli crouched beside the beam with a ruler and pencil. Mara watched him mark the starting height. You trust that more than your ears? I trust having both. He made a second mark on the opposite face, then tied strips of colored tape around the temporary supports. Blue for the jack point, yellow for the posts carrying weight, red for the ones they were not to touch. Mara lifted an eyebrow. Cabinet shop do that? The cabinet shop spent 6 months looking for a stack of cherry panels someone put behind the boiler. And tape saved them? No. The boiler cooked them into salad bowls. That's why I use tape. She handed him the jack handle. The first pump met almost no resistance. The second pressed the steel plate into the timber. By the 5th, Eli felt tension travel through the handle. A faint complaint moved overhead, not a crack, but a long wooden murmur. Stop, Mara said. He froze. They listened. A sprinkle of grit fell from the stone beneath the sill. The blue-taped post straightened by less than the width of his pencil line. One more, she said. He pumped. The damaged brace relaxed enough for Mara to slide a thin metal shim behind it. That's enough. Eli checked his marks. 3/16. I had it at an 1/8. You were wrong. I was feeling generous. They secured the load with the yellow-taped posts. Mara crawled beneath the beam to inspect the jack, while Eli kept his palm against the nearest brace. The wood vibrated faintly, a pulse too slow to be real. A bead of hydraulic fluid appeared along the jack's cylinder. Hey, I see it. Mara rolled out fast. Together they transferred the weight to a second jack, neither speaking until the failing one sat harmlessly in the grass. She wiped the fluid with a rag. Seal's gone. You checked it yesterday. I checked that it raised. I didn't leave it under load. Eli looked at his pencil marks. Without them, they might not have noticed the fraction of an inch settling. Mara followed his gaze. Don't get smug. I'm not smug. You're standing smug. How does somebody stand smug? Weight on one leg, mouth irritating. He shifted his weight deliberately onto the other leg. That's worse, she said. Near noon, a white SUV came down the lower track slowly enough to avoid mud. Lacey climbed out holding a plastic bin and wearing boots too clean for the field. Eli had met Grant's wife twice, once at their wedding and once when Raymond was hospitalized after cutting 2 fingers on a table saw. Both times she had hugged him as if they shared a private understanding neither had established. She did it again. You're freezing, she said into his shoulder. I'm covered in sawdust. I have a lint roller. Of course she did. Lacey set the bin beside the camper. Her blonde hair was tied beneath a red scarf, and small gold hoops flashed when she turned toward the barn. This is much more dramatic in person. The barn, the ropes. It looks like you've captured it. Mara stepped down from a ladder. Temporarily. I brought sheets, traps, disinfectant, and a pillow Grant says is too firm. Lacey glanced at the camper. The sheets are not Turkish cotton. Eli looked at her. Beth told me about the towels. I didn't ask. No, but you were going to think it. She opened the bin. Beneath folded flannel sheets were 2 sandwiches, a bag of apples, and a roll of paper towels. It was an offering assembled by someone determined not to call it one. Grant sent all this? The pillow. The rest would upset his sense of boundaries. Mara took an apple. Lacey watched her bite into it. He talks about you. Grant? Raymond? Mara stopped chewing. Used to, Lacey corrected quickly. Raymond used to talk about you. Sorry, verb tense has been difficult. For the first time, Eli saw strain beneath her polished expression. Lacey rubbed the side of the bin with one thumb. He told people you could fix anything made before 1950, she said. He exaggerated. He also said modern screws were evidence of declining standards. That, he believed. Lacey looked through the open bay. What will it be when you're done? Eli waited for Mara to answer. A dry place to repair 2 doors, she said. That's all? That's enough for this week. Lacey smiled, but her eyes lingered on the chestnut frame. Grant says it should be demolished. Grant says many things, Eli said. He says more when he's scared. Of the barn, of expenses, of looking foolish, of finding out the house means less to everyone than it meant to him. Eli picked up the plastic bin. He got what he wanted. Lacey's smile thinned. Those aren't opposites. She left without visiting the farmhouse. Eli watched the SUV climb the track, tires slipping once in the mud. Mara tossed her apple core toward the weeds and missed. Historic restoration specialist, Eli said. I don't restore fruit. By late afternoon, they had removed the cracked brace and shaped a temporary replacement from the construction lumber. Mara laid the old piece on sawhorses rather than throwing it into the discard pile. The crack ran through a knot near one end. Eli turned the brace over and found a series of shallow numbers written in chalk. Dad's? No. Mine. What do they mean? Angles. I was trying to calculate the shoulder cut. You did that in place? I was 19 and wanted him to think I knew what I was doing. Did he? No. He made me cut it 3 times. Eli ran a finger beside the chalk. He let you cut chestnut 3 times? He let me cut scrap twice. This one once. That sounds more like him. Mara took the brace from him and set it down harder than necessary. What? Nothing? You keep saying nothing like it's a complete answer. It was his favorite. She measured the temporary brace. Eli waited. Finally, Mara said, he made me redo work until I thought I was stupid. Then he'd show it to a customer and say, we restored this. Never Mara restored this. Never even my apprentice. Just we. You wanted credit. I wanted to exist. The words landed close enough that Eli looked away. Mara marked her cut. The difference was, I could quit him without disappointing my mother. She thought I should stay. Your mother thought everyone should stay. Then she was the first one who didn't. Eli's gaze snapped back. Mara frowned. I'm sorry. No, you're not. You're sorry you said it. Yes. Their mother had moved to Arizona when Eli was 22, after 31 years of marriage and a winter in which Raymond spoke to her mostly through notes about heating oil. She called on Sundays. Every conversation ended with an invitation Eli could not afford to accept. He positioned the brace against the saw guide. You knew her well? Well enough to know she hated this barn. Why? She said it got the best hours of every man in the family. He started the saw before Mara could see that sentence find him. They finished the bracing near dark. The temporary roof was a heavy tarp stretched over new rafters, pitched enough to shed water toward the east ditch. It snapped in the wind, but held. They hung 2 LED work lights from the standing plate and ran an extension cord to the equipment shed. When Mara plugged them in, white light filled the bay. The transformation was almost insulting. The walls were still broken. Mud showed between floorboards. Braces crossed the opening at awkward angles, and the tarp roof made the space resemble a roadside tent. But the light gathered beneath the old chestnut frame and stayed there. For the first time, Eli could see the entire standing bay at once. Tool marks traveled along the posts. Iron hooks waited in the walls. Raymond's measurements remained visible inside the alcove. The blue-striped clamp hung straight beneath them. Mara stood beside him with both hands on her hips. Dry enough, she said. Rain began 10 minutes later, as if summoned for inspection. They stood beneath the tarp and watched water race down its slope. One corner sagged. Eli used a scrapboard to push it higher, sending a sheet of collected rain over the edge and directly onto Mara. She stared at him, dripping. I didn't know you were there. You looked at me first. I was checking clearance. You smiled. I smile under stress. Mara picked up a wet rag and threw it at his chest. He caught it. She reached for another, and for a few ridiculous seconds, they armed themselves from opposite sides of the new brace, both trying not to laugh, because laughing would grant the other person something. The tarp corner slipped again and dumped water between them. That ended it. Mara laughed with her head lowered, one hand over her eyes. Eli had forgotten the sound. At 19, she had laughed rarely and suddenly, as if it surprised her too. When the rain eased, they backed her trailer to the bay. The church doors were heavier than they looked, each nearly 10 feet tall and built from layered pine with arched upper panels. Eli and Mara lowered the first onto a rolling platform, then guided it across planks into the light. The white paint had blistered along the bottom rail. Gold leaf clung around a carved quatrefoil. At the upper hinge, the wood had split outward in a ragged fan. Mara ran her hand over the damage. Wind caught this one open, she said, pulled the screws straight through. Eli crouched near the lower panel. A narrow crack followed the paint line, too regular to be fresh. This was repaired before. Church records say 1978. They glued the panel, probably. It can't move. Mara came beside him. Show me. He traced the joint without touching it. Panel's trapped in the groove. Humidity swells it. Frame holds it. Weakest point opens here. Wind finished what the glue started. Mara pressed her thumbnail into the crack, then sighted along the rail. You're right. The words came without reluctance. Eli was not prepared for how much that mattered. Holcomb built inset doors, he said. Not like this, but panels still move. Then tomorrow we take it apart. We? You're being paid. I thought I was being paid to clear the bay. Mara unzipped her jacket and hung it from a new brace. You want me to find someone else? The correct answer was yes. He had stabilized the space. He could sell the timbers, pay off what he owed, and leave before the barn became another thing that expected him to stay. Instead, he looked at the door under the work lights. Someone had built it more than a century ago. Someone else had repaired it badly. Now the damage told the whole story, if a person knew where to look. How early? He asked. 7. You showed up at 6 today. I wanted to catch you asleep. Why? You're less argumentative. He looked toward the camper, then back at the split panel. 6:30, he said. Mara nodded. We'll see. At 6:28, Eli had coffee waiting in the saucepan. Mara looked into it, then at him. You did this on purpose. I followed your recipe. I don't have a recipe. That explains it. He handed her a cup and pointed to the church door. During the night, he had taped small paper labels beside every visible joint. A sketch lay on the folding table, each rail and stile numbered. He had drawn arrows where the old repair resisted movement and circled 3 places where paint concealed fasteners. Mara lifted the sketch. You were up late. The mice were playing cards. Did they win? They cheat. She studied his notes longer than the joke required. Raymond would have found the one missing measurement before acknowledging the rest. Mara tapped the corner of the page. This is good. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm adjusting my expectations. Up or down? She picked up her coffee. We'll see. They began by removing the iron hardware. Each hinge strap was nearly 3 feet long, fixed with slotted screws buried beneath generations of paint. Mara heated the first screw with a soldering iron, while Eli cleaned its slot with the sharpened end of a hacksaw blade. Slow, she said. I'm moving slow. You're breathing fast because you're watching. That's usually when people take more care. Not in my experience. The screw turned a fraction. Eli stopped, reset the driver, and turned it again. When it finally came free, he placed it in a labeled tray. Mara leaned against the workbench they had made from 2 sawhorses and a plank. Your father stored hardware in coffee cans. Dad stored coffee in coffee cans. Everything else went in jelly jars. He once gave me a jar marked half-inch screws. It contained buttons, washers, and 1 dead moth. Did he need any of them later? The moth, maybe. By 10, they had removed both hinge straps without shearing a screw. Beneath the lower one, the wood was black and damp. Eli pressed a dental pick into it. The surface gave, then firmed half an inch down. Not as bad as it looks, he said. That should be painted over the door. Mara showed him how to build a cradle before they loosened the frame. The door could not be laid flat on the uneven floor, so they supported it at 6 points and checked for twist with winding sticks. Eli adjusted the shims until the sticks aligned. You've done this, she said. Not with a church door, something large, conference table, 12 feet. Client wanted 1 solid slab until he found out trees are narrow. What did you build? Veneered torsion box. Did he know? He thought torsion box was a kind of wood. Mara smiled and handed him a mallet. Under the paint, the joinery told on every repairer who had touched it. The original mortise and tenon joints were pegged. Someone had added nails in the 20s or 30s. Later, long screws had been driven through the stiles. The 1978 repair had used a hard amber adhesive that squeezed from the panel groove like frozen sap. They worked wedges under the first rail. Easy, Mara said. Eli tapped his wedge once. I said easy. That was easy. You have Raymond's hands. He stopped. Mara closed her eyes briefly. I meant the size. No, you didn't. I meant you both hit harder than you think. The rail had moved less than a 1/16 of an inch. Eli set down the mallet. He never said I had his hands. He mostly complained about his own. He complained about mine. Mara crouched on the other side of the door. What happened to that walnut panel? He looked at her. The one you brought into the shop the day you left. I didn't leave that day? No. You spent 3 more weeks making everybody miserable. He told me to sand out the gouge. Could it be sanded out? If you wanted one side of the cabinet thinner, what did you do? Cut a matching recess in inlaid maple. Mara blinked. That was yours? What was? The pair of cabinets in the back hall, dark walnut, maple lines across both doors. He used them, he sold them. Eli stared at the rail between them. Raymond had said nothing about selling the cabinets. Nothing about the inlay except that making 2 cuts did not erase the first. To who? I don't remember. A couple from Stowe, maybe. Did he tell them I made the doors? Mara's pause answered. Eli picked up the mallet. Easy, she said. He struck the wedge too hard. The rail jumped, and a flake of old paint snapped free. Mara caught his wrist. That is exactly what I meant. He pulled away. You wanted the joint open. I wanted open in one piece. They worked in silence until the rail loosened. The trapped panel released with a dry pop, as if it had been holding its breath for 40 years. A truck came down the track near noon. The woman who climbed out wore a navy raincoat over black slacks and carried a paper bag with the careful posture of someone transporting soup. Mara wiped her hands. Ruth Calder chaired the property committee at St. Luke's and had spoken to Mara by phone almost every day since the windstorm. She had close-cropped silver hair, practical shoes, and the alert expression of a person who expected any visible object to generate an invoice. I brought lunch, she said. It's not a bribe. What do you need? Mara asked. The committee meets tonight, Friday, like I told you. Some members were hoping Thursday. Friday. Ruth looked into the barn. Her gaze moved over the tarp roof, temporary posts, mud, and dismantled door. Goodness. It's controlled, Mara said. I'm sure. You don't sound sure. I sound Presbyterian. St. Luke's is Episcopal. Property committees share a denomination. Eli turned his laugh into a cough. Ruth noticed him. You must be Raymond's younger son. There were few descriptions he disliked more, but she said it without pity. Eli. I'm Ruth. Your father repaired our chancel screen. I heard. Twice. The first time because the building committee moved it after he told us not to. Mara took the lunch bag from her. We'll have the doors. Friday. Both? Both. Eli glanced at the second door, still wrapped on the trailer. Mara did not. Ruth seemed to see the exchange. There is flexibility if you need it. Friday, Mara repeated. After she left, Eli opened the lunch bag. 2 containers of chicken stew, thick slices of bread, and oatmeal cookies were packed inside. She likes you, he said. She thinks feeding people lowers labor costs. Does it? He bit into a cookie. A little. They ate on overturned buckets while wind worried the tarp. Eli watched Mara calculate without writing anything down. Both doors by Friday, he said. That's the contract. You said they needed to be apart, repaired, and rehung before Thanksgiving. You didn't say this Friday. You didn't ask. You use that a lot. It remains true. They had 4 days. Eli looked at the disassembled lower rail. The second door may not need to come fully apart. It's out of square. So, was this one because the panel couldn't move? We don't know if it was repaired the same way. We could know in an hour. Mara ate the last of her stew, then stood. Finish cleaning that groove. I'll get the second one inside. I'll help. You'll finish the groove. The door weighs 600 pounds. The winch does not. She backed the trailer to the planks and attached a hand winch to the rolling platform. Eli kept working, though every metallic click drew his attention. Mara disliked being watched almost as much as he did. She moved the second door halfway down the trailer, stopped, adjusted the strap, and continued. The left plank cracked. The platform dropped 2 inches and tilted toward the barn post. Eli ran. Mara grabbed the winch line with both hands and leaned back. The door shifted, its upper edge swinging toward her. Eli hit it with his shoulder and shoved while she hauled the line sideways. "Chalk!" she shouted. He kicked a timber block beneath the low wheel. It bounced out. He dropped to one knee, grabbed it, and drove it under with the heel of his hand. The platform stopped. Mara made a sound between a gasp and a curse. Her right arm fell against her side. "You hit?" "No. Your shoulder." I pulled it. The door stood canted above them, held by one good plank. The winch and the block under the wheel. Eli kept both palms against the stile. "Can you hold the line?" "Yes." "Are you lying?" "Yes." He looked toward the equipment shed. The steel posts were 50 yards away. The bottle jack sat beside the barn. Mara's face had gone pale beneath her cap. "Loop the line around the post," he said. "I can't reach it. Step toward me. Keep tension with your left hand." "Eli, I've got the door. You don't have 600 pounds. I have the top. Move." She moved 1 step, feeding the line around the chestnut post. The platform rocked. Eli pressed with his legs and felt the weight travel through his spine. Mara wrapped the line twice and tied it off one-handed. Done. He eased away. The door held. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Mara tried to lift her right arm. It rose perhaps 6 inches before her face tightened. That needs a doctor. It needs ice. It needs somebody who didn't learn medicine from a carpenter. She glared at the broken plank as if it had behaved unprofessionally. "I checked those. They were wet underneath. I should have seen it." "Yes." Her eyes snapped to him. He nodded toward the camper. "You've been telling me mistakes out loud all week. I assumed that was the system." To his surprise, she laughed once, though it hurt her. He drove her to urgent care in her truck because she refused to leave it beside the barn with the keys inside. 2 hours later, she emerged wearing a sling and carrying instructions she had already folded into quarters. "Strain," she said. "No fracture." "How long?" 10 days without lifting. "The doors are due in 4. I know when Friday is." On the ride back, she stared out at the darkening hills. Eli could see calculations moving behind her face and failing one by one. At the barn, the second door still leaned safely on the trapped platform. "I'll call Ruth," Mara said. "To say what? That we need more time." Eli looked at the opened first door, the labeled hardware, and his sketch on the table. Then he looked at the second door's lower panels. Even from the truck, he could see a hairline crack following the same rigid paint edge. "Give me tomorrow," he said. Mara turned her head. "You can't lift. I can supervise." "I don't need supervision. Everyone needs supervision." Raymond certainly thought so. "I'm not him." "No," she said. "You're not." He waited for the rest. It did not come. Mara removed the truck keys and placed them in his hand. "Don't make me regret that," she said. Eli closed his fingers around them. "I'll add it to the list." Mara's keys included 11 brass keys, 2 plastic tags, a bottle opener, and 1 tiny carved mallet worn smooth by years in a pocket. Eli held it up. "Sentimental, promotional. It looks handmade." Raymond made 50 of them for a trade show and misspelled restoration on the handles. Eli turned it over. "Merciar Restoraton." He handed them out anyway. He said spelling was an office skill. The truck cab smelled of cedar chips, peppermint gum, and the liniment Mara had bought at Urgent Care. He drove her to the camper, where she lowered herself onto the plaid bench without removing the sling. "You should go home," he said. 40 minutes each way. You'll need the truck at 6. You can't sleep sitting up. Watch me." He found the flannel sheets Lacey had brought and made up the lower bunk. Mara objected until she tried to stand and discovered the pain medication had made the camper tilt. "I hate medication," she said. "I think it hates you too. It makes my face numb." "You're speaking with your face?" "You know what I mean." He took her boots before she could fall over and put a folded blanket behind her shoulder. She was asleep within minutes, one socked foot hanging off the bunk. Eli sat at the table beneath the battery lantern and drew the second door. The cracked plank had forced them to stop, but it had also revealed the problem with their approach. They did not need to drag 600 pounds into the barn as one unsupported load. The platform needed wider runners, a controlled ramp, and 2 restraint lines instead of 1. He marked every place the door's weight could transfer, then went outside and measured the trailer height. At midnight, Mara woke and found him sawing blocks under the work lights. "You said tomorrow," she called. "It is tomorrow. That's not how sleep works. Go back inside." "I can't supervise from bed." "You're doing a good job so far." She came out wearing her jacket over the sling and stood beneath the tarp, her hair stuck up on one side. Eli showed her the doubled planks and the guide rails he had fixed along the platform. One rope ran through a block at the barn post. The other went to a steel post he had driven into the ground. "You're using the winch to lower," she said, "and the second line to control the top. The runner can still kick sideways." He pointed to 2 short blocks screwed against the trailer deck. Mara studied them. "Those will hold. I know. You could pretend to appreciate confirmation. You could pretend you weren't looking for a reason I'm wrong." Her expression changed, not much. "I'm looking for the reason the door falls," she said. "That's my job." He heard the difference. "Then keep looking." They moved it at first light. Eli operated the winch in short clicks while Mara kept light tension on the control line with her left hand. The platform rolled down the doubled planks, settled onto the barn floor, and stopped squarely between the guide rails. Nothing cracked, nothing swung. Mara looked disappointed for half a second. "Too dull?" he asked. "I had several useful warnings prepared. Save them. I'll do something stupid eventually. You have natural talent." The second door had been repaired exactly like the first. Hard glue locked the lower panel inside its groove, and shrinkage had opened the frame at both corners, but the hinge side style remained tight, and the upper joints were sound. Eli proposed removing only the bottom rail. Mara stood over his sketch. "If that style is twisted, you won't get the rail back square." "It's not twisted. You checked with winding sticks and a string line." "When?" "While you were criticizing my ramp." She walked to the door and checked for herself. "You're irritating," she said. "Weight on one leg, mouth mostly." They cut through the concealed screws, softened the old adhesive with controlled heat, and worked the bottom rail free. Mara could not hold tools securely with her injured arm, so she talked Eli through each step from a folding chair. At first, her instructions filled the bay. "Lower angle. I am lower. On the chisel, not your mood." Then say chisel. "Don't pry against the panel. I'm not." "You're considering it." By afternoon, her voice came less often. Eli learned which silences meant approval and which meant she was choosing a polite substitute for stop. He labeled every fragment, photographed every joint, and refused to hurry when the rail resisted. When it released, the panel moved nearly a quarter inch inside the groove. Mara leaned forward. There. Eli slid it left, then right. It's been trying to do that since 1978. Most people don't enjoy discovering how long they've been stuck. He looked at her. She pretended to inspect the rail. They spent the next 2 days repairing the split frames. Rotten wood at the hinge points came out in careful pockets. Eli fitted new pine blocks with the grain aligned to the original styles, each patch shaped by hand until it seated without force. Mara rejected his first one because the shoulder was too tight. It fits. Today. It's wood. Everything only fits today. Good. So you do understand. He remade it. The second patch went in cleanly. Rather than burying the repair beneath thick filler, they left a fine outline where new pine met old. Once painted, it would be visible only to someone standing close. Mara ran a fingertip along the joint. Raymond would have made that disappear. Do you want it to disappear? No? Then why mention him? Because you're waiting for me to. He set down the block plane. I'm not. You ask what he would have done every time you ask if something's right. I ask you. But you listen for him. Eli looked toward the alcove where Raymond's pencil measurements remained on the wall. You sound pretty sure. I did it too. That why you left? Mara adjusted the sling strap. Partly. What's the other part? Finish the door. He nearly pushed, but her face had gone still. He returned to the plane. Friday morning arrived with frost on the grass and the first hard blue sky of the week. They loaded both doors before sunrise. Grant came down while Eli was tightening the straps. He walked around the trailer without speaking. The doors lay side by side on padded blocks, repaired frames primed, hardware cleaned and oiled. The gold around the carved panels had been protected beneath paper. You did those? Grant asked. Mara supervised. That's not what I asked. It was Beth's sentence from the first day. Eli pulled the strap tighter. Yes. Grant rubbed a thumb over the edge of the lower rail. Dad hated primer. Dad hated anything that came in a can. He liked peaches, only because he thought they were pears. Grant laughed before catching himself. Mara came from the camper carrying coffee one-handed. Are you available for lifting? Grant's face closed by habit. I have work. Then stop touching the door. He removed his hand. At St. Luke's, Ruth had assembled 4 members of the property committee and a retired contractor named Dean, who wore suspenders beneath his work jacket. Mara looked at the group, then at Eli. Too many opinions, she murmured. Can we send some back? Ruth approached before they could decide. You made Friday. It's still morning, Mara said. Don't celebrate. The side entrance stood open beneath a stone arch. Without the doors, it looked like a missing tooth in the old white church. Eli and Dean set temporary lifting poles while Mara checked the hinge locations against her notes. The repaired doors fit the opening, but the building had shifted since they were removed. The upper hinge on the north side sat an 1/8 inch too far inward. Dean suggested planing the door edge. Eli looked at the weathered jamb. Door was rubbing because that hinge leaf is bent. Dean frowned. Leaf looks straight. Face does. Barrel doesn't. He placed a straight edge against the hinge pin. Light showed at the center. Mara said nothing. Dean checked again, grunted, and removed the hinge for adjustment. They hung the first door at 11. It swung inward without binding and settled against its stop with a heavy finish sound. The second followed after lunch. Ruth stood in the entrance, opening and closing them, as though she expected the success to expire. They're lighter, she said. Same weight, Eli replied. They're square now. She examined the pale outline around one repaired hinge block. I can see where the wood is new. Eli prepared for complaint. Mara looked at him, but did not answer for him. We could cover it, he said. More paint, some filler. But the new block is doing real work. If somebody repairs this again, they should know where the old style ends and the patch begins. Ruth touched the line. My husband used to fix stone walls, she said. He said a repair ought to have the manners to introduce itself. That's one way to put it. He usually said it after making something crooked. She smiled and opened the door again. When the committee had gone, Mara sat on the church steps while Eli coiled ropes. Her injured arm rested against her coat. You didn't need me, she said. I needed your truck. I'm serious. So am I. My car would have folded under the first door. She watched him tie the coil. You saw the hinge. It was bent. Dean didn't see it. Dean wanted to remove wood because he had a planer in his truck. That is how most professional judgment works. Ruth came around the side of the building carrying an envelope and a photograph on her phone. One more thing, she said. A friend has a dining table damaged when a pipe burst. It belonged to her mother. She was going to call a furniture store, but I told her to wait. She showed them a dark oak table with one end lifted and the top cupped badly along its seam. Mara studied the image. That's not a small repair? I assume not. Ruth looked at Eli. Would you be willing to see it? He almost directed her to Mara. Mara remained silent. Eli looked at the photograph again. The damage was ugly, but it had a pattern. Water had entered from one side. The base might still be square. If the finish could be softened and the top dried under controlled pressure, I'll look, he said. Ruth nodded, satisfied, and walked away. Mara stood. You're looking busy? It's one table. That's how it starts. What starts? She looked toward the church doors, both hanging straight beneath the stone arch. The next thing, she said. The next thing lived 12 miles away, in a yellow house with a porch that tilted toward the road. Ruth's friend met them at the door with a dish towel over one shoulder and a screwdriver in her hand. I'm Evelyn Shaw, she said. The basement window won't latch, the kitchen faucet screams, and neither of those is why you're here. She was in her 70s, compact and brisk, with white hair cut close around her ears. She took one look at Mara's sling. You're not moving the table. No, Mara said. Evelyn looked at Eli. Are you? If it's safe? That sounds disappointingly reasonable. The dining table stood in a sunroom surrounded by towels, fans, and 3 open boxes of baking soda. Dark oak, 6 feet long, pedestal base, extension mechanism beneath. One end of the top had risen into a shallow curl. The seam down the center had opened enough to catch a fingernail. A pipe let go upstairs, Evelyn said. Water came through the ceiling for most of an afternoon. My neighbor turned it off. Eli crouched to see beneath the top. The underside was wet, but not soft. 2 later braces had been screwed across the grain, probably to flatten an earlier cup. As the upper surface dried, the braces had kept the underside from moving with it. Who put these on, he asked. My brother. He believed every problem could be solved by adding lumber. When? During the Reagan administration. Mara stood on the opposite side. The base? Dry, Eli said. Water ran off the top and missed most of it. He slid the extension mechanism. It resisted, then opened. The runners were swollen but intact. Evelyn watched him. Your father repaired those chairs. 6 ladderbacks lined the wall, their rush seats faded honey brown. He did? Before you were born. Charged me $12 each and complained that I watched. Are they holding? One squeaks. Then he overcharged you. Evelyn's mouth twitched. Eli explained that the top had to dry slowly before they knew how much of the distortion would relax. The added braces should come off. The finish might cloud. The central joint would likely need to be opened and re-glued, but forcing it flat too early could split the boards. How long? She asked. 3 weeks to know what we have. And after that, maybe another 2. Mara said nothing. Eli could feel her evaluating every word. Evelyn crossed her arms. How much? He had not calculated that part. He thought of hourly pay, materials, transport, the uncertainty of the finish. He thought of $1,100 in his account, and the envelope of cash shrinking each time he bought gas. $400, he said. Mara inhaled through her nose. Evelyn looked at her. Too much? No. Too little? Mara's mouth became a line. Evelyn returned her attention to Eli. How much if you find more damage? I call you before doing more, and if it can't be made perfect, it won't be perfect. He expected that to lose the job. Instead, she nodded. Good. My mother made bread on that table for 40 years. If you make it look new, I won't recognize it. They settled at $600 after Mara made Eli include transport, finished materials, and the possibility of rebuilding one runner. Evelyn wrote a deposit check at her kitchen counter. While she did, Eli tried the basement window latch. The sash had swollen in the frame. He drove one loose screw home and shifted the keeper plate less than 1/8 of an inch. The latch closed. Evelyn handed him the check. I didn't ask you to do that. It bothered me. My faucet screams too. That costs extra. On the drive back, Mara balanced the check on her knee. 400? I hadn't finished thinking. You said it aloud. That's usually when thinking has ended. I'm new at this. You built 20% uncertainty into your repair estimate and 0% into your price. It's her mother's table. Sentiment does not lower the cost of sandpaper. It matters. It matters to the work. It does not mean you donate the work. Eli gripped the steering wheel. Raymond used to charge people whatever he thought they could afford. He also knew what his time cost. Did he? Mara looked out the window. Not always. They loaded the table by separating the top from the pedestal. Evelyn insisted on carrying the drawers from the extension mechanism and nearly knocked Eli into a wall when he tried to take them. At the barn, they laid the top on padded supports beneath the work lights. The space had begun accumulating the shapes of work. Clamps lined the alcove. The church door hardware trays had become containers for screws and wedges. Mara's block plane rested beside Eli's drawings. The white primer dust had settled into cracks in the old floor. The barn was still a wreck, but one corner had acquired habits. Eli removed the added braces from the table. The last screw came out wet and black. The top relaxed with a faint creak. 1/2 an inch at the end, he said. Mara checked with winding sticks. 5/8, your angle. My eyes? He measured again. 9/16. Then we're both wrong. They built a drying platform that allowed air to circulate evenly above and below. Eli cut a series of curved cauls but left them loose, ready for gradual pressure later. Mara watched him label each one by position. You enjoy making parts that don't do anything yet. They do something. They wait in order. Very skilled. You mock systems because you lose everything. I know where my tools are. Where's your 1/4 inch chisel? She patted 2 jacket pockets, then checked the bench. Eli pointed to the back pocket of her jeans. That proves nothing. By the end of the week, Mara could move her shoulder without swearing. By the middle of the next, she abandoned the sling against medical advice, but accepted Eli's rule that she lift nothing heavier than the coffee pot. The table dried slowly. Each morning, Eli measured the cup at 5 marked points and recorded the numbers on graph paper. The line dropped, flattened, then dropped again. On the 8th day, Evelyn arrived unannounced with a pie. She stood at the threshold, where a rope blocked the unstable portion of the barn. Visitors stay on this side, Eli said. I'm not a visitor, I'm a client. Clients fall exactly the same. She handed him the pie. Ruth said the barn was damaged. She did not mention that most of it was horizontal. Evelyn examined the drying table, listened to Eli explain the readings, and ran her palm over the cupped edge. It looks worse apart, she said. Most things do. Mara glanced at him. Evelyn looked toward the collapsed western bays. Your father talked about fixing this place. Eli waited. He talked about many things, she added, usually while avoiding the thing he was being paid to fix. That sounds right. He once spent an hour describing a wood stove he planned to install here. Then he put my chair rung in backward. Mara frowned. He never put a rung in backward. He said it was backward. I couldn't tell. He took it apart anyway. After Evelyn left, Mara cut the pie into 4 uneven pieces. Who gets the 4th? Eli asked. Tomorrow. You think pie survives overnight in this camper? It survives if you have discipline. He ate 2 pieces while she was outside. More work arrived in small, inconvenient forms. Ruth brought a cracked kneeler from the church. Lacey brought a drawer from the farmhouse that would not close and claimed she was asking for the hospitality industry. Beth appeared with a maple stool whose legs had loosened, then admitted she had intentionally wobbled it in front of 2 syrup customers so they would ask who repaired furniture nearby. You're advertising me with defective seating? I'm creating an authentic demonstration. Someone could fall. They were both sturdy adults. Mara looked over the stool. $5. Beth stared. That's all? For the repair. Advertising consultation is $50. Beth turned to Eli. I don't like your partner. We're not partners, he and Mara said together. The word lingered after Beth left. At night, Eli began drawing the barn, not plans. He knew too little for plans. He measured the standing frame and sketched what remained beneath the collapse. He marked chestnut posts, oak repairs, fractured rafters, and sections he could not safely reach. Using Mara's old photographs from jobs, he tried to understand how a frame came apart in reverse order. The temporary bay could handle rain. It could not carry snow. November waited 3 weeks away. One evening, Mara found the drawing spread across the camper table. She had brought a binder of estimates for roofing and rigging, though she did not open it. "You're drawing 5 bents," she said. "I'm recording 5. 2 may not be recoverable. I know. And the foundation under the west wall has moved. I know that too. Do you?" Eli set down his pencil. "You don't want me to keep it." Mara leaned against the tiny sink. "I want you to know what keeping it costs. So, tell me." "Dismantling safely costs more than the table job pays. Storing the frame takes space. Repairing it takes tools you don't have. Raising even 3 bents takes a crew. Then you need a roof, siding, power, heat. There is no version where you work hard for a month and a beautiful shop appears. I didn't say there was. You're sleeping in a camper with a flat tire. It's only flat on the bottom." Eli. He looked through the window at the barn, one bay shining beneath the temporary lights while the rest dissolved into darkness. "If I sell the timbers, somebody dismantles it anyway. For salvage. So, they'll take whatever comes out easily and cut the rest. Probably. And then what?" Mara did not answer. Wind pressed leaves against the camper step. Somewhere inside the barn, the tarp snapped. Eli gathered the drawings into one stack. "You said the frame could be rebuilt smaller. I said Raymond believed it could. What do you believe?" She looked toward the lighted bay. "I believe 3 bents are sound enough to save," she said. "Maybe 4. I believe the old sill repairs were better than they had any reason to be. I believe we can take it apart without losing the frame if we do it before a heavy snow." I said we can. I did not say we should." The next gust lifted the tarp corner and slapped it down. Eli thought of the church doors settling into their stone opening, Evelyn's table relaxing by fractions, the blue paint still visible on Raymond's clamp. "Show me how to take it down," he said. Mara stood very still. "All of it?" she asked. "Everything that can stand again." She looked at the drawings once more, then reached for the unopened binder. "That," she said, "is going to cost more than pie." The binder had tabs labeled rigging, roofing, stone, electrical, and bad news. Eli opened the last section first. "That one is blank." "I thought the title covered it," Mara said. The numbers in the other sections did not require commentary. A crane and operator for one day cost $2,200, assuming the operator did not have to wait while they argued. Scaffolding rental, straps, blocking, temporary storage, and liability coverage added another $3,000. That got the frame safely onto the ground. It did not repair or raise anything. Eli turned to roofing and closed the binder again. "I have $1,500. You have a table payment coming, which gets me to $2,000. You need to eat. I've seen the soup you buy. That's negotiable." Mara sat across from him at the camper table, shoulder tucked close to her body. She had arranged the estimates in the order she wanted him to understand them. Raymond would have tossed the numbers down one at a time and watched him fail to catch them. "I can cover the crane," she said. "No, it's not a gift. I still don't have it. My business does. Your business is 1 truck and a garage that's too small for doors. My business is also 12 years of paid invoices and a line of credit." Eli looked toward the barn window. Mara continued. "I use the bay for restoration work through winter. No rent until the crane cost is repaid. After that, we negotiate. The company and the property owner." "You mean you and me?" "I find nouns helpful when people get emotional. I'm not emotional." You opened the roofing tab and stopped blinking. He reopened the binder. "What happens if we take it down and can't afford to put it back up?" "We store the frame under cover." "Where?" "Stacked on cribbing beside the equipment shed." "For how long?" "As long as the covers hold and the timbers stay off the ground." So, I inherit a collapsed barn and turn it into an organized pile. That is one possible middle. He hated the word because it made room for failure without calling it final. They agreed Mara would front the crane and rigging costs. Eli would provide labor without drawing pay from the dismantling, though paid restoration jobs remained separate. Mara would use the stabilized bay through winter. Beth, recruited by phone, insisted they write the arrangement down. "On what?" Eli asked. "Paper, ideally." Mara found an old grocery bag. Beth refused to witness terms written beside a coupon for canned tomatoes, so they used a page from Eli's graph pad instead. The agreement looked amateur because it was. That made Eli trust it more. Before they could touch the frame, they finished Evelyn's table. Drying had reduced the cup by nearly half. Eli eased the top the rest of the way with padded cauls, adding pressure a quarter turn at a time over 5 days. He opened the failed center joint, cleaned out brittle glue, and brought the boards together without planning away the ridge worn beneath decades of plates and elbows. The old finish had clouded where water sat. He softened it, moved what remained rather than stripping it, and added thin coats only where bare wood showed. Mara inspected the finished top under raking light. "You left a stain? It won't come out without taking the whole surface down." "I know. Then why say it? To see if you know." He looked at the pale shadow near one end. Evelyn said she didn't want new. Customers say many things before the furniture is in their house. Evelyn arrived with Ruth and watched them reassemble the table in the sunroom. The top no longer curled. The extension slid. The water stain remained as a faint, irregular island in the finish. Evelyn ran both hands over it. "My mother put a hot preserving pot there," she said. Eli looked closer. "That's the stain?" "Part of it. Water made it show again." Mara's eyes met his over the table. Evelyn sat in one of Raymond's ladder-back chairs and listened for the squeak. It came when she leaned left. "There," she said. "I'll fix it," Eli replied. "I've been listening to it for 30 years. Leave it alone." She paid the balance and added $50. "You already paid the estimate. That's for the window latch. That took one screw. It bothered you. Distress has value." She asked for 3 of his cards. He did not have cards. By the time he and Mara reached the truck, Ruth had written his name and number on the back of 3 church bulletins. The dismantling began with 6 days of removing everything that was not carrying weight. Grant lent them the farm trailer after making Eli promise not to overload the axle. Beth spent her afternoons pulling roofing nails and her mornings managing the sugar woods. Lacey supplied sandwiches and photographed nothing, which Eli suspected required effort. Mara brought 2 workers she trusted from previous jobs. June Bell, a roofer with silver braids and no patience for anyone standing beneath her ladder, and Oscar Reed, a timber framer who communicated mostly through whistles. Both were adults old enough to ignore family tension and experienced enough to leave when Grant tried to direct traffic. They stripped broken metal, rotten rafters, and siding from the collapsed bays. Every timber received a metal tag and a matching entry on Eli's drawing. He marked upper faces before anything moved, photographed joinery, and kept hardware in buckets tied to the pieces they belonged to. On the second day, Oscar examined the system and whistled twice. "What does that mean?" Eli asked Mara. "He approves. How do you know? He only whistles once when he thinks you're an idiot." Grant came down often. At first he claimed he was checking on the trailer. Then he began bringing coffee. He watched the barn emerge from its wreckage, the old frame exposed one member at a time. "You're really putting this back up," he said. "Smaller," Eli replied. "What are you doing with it? Shop? Just restoration?" Eli looked at him. "Just?" Grant leaned against his truck. "I'm saying you could have other income, events, dinners. Lacey knows people who rent spaces for retreats. It's 24 feet wide. Once it's standing, you could add on. It isn't standing yet. I'm trying to think ahead." "You thought ahead when it was mine to demolish." Grant pushed away from the truck. "You're going to use that forever, aren't you?" "Use what?" "The fact that I thought a collapsed barn was a collapsed barn." Eli had no answer that would not simply be yes. Grant gestured toward the farmhouse. "We've got 28 windows over there. Original sash, most painted shut. Mara says restoration is expensive, but replacing them is worse." "When did you ask Mara?" "Yesterday." Eli looked across the work area. Mara stood with June near the west sill, both studying a split beam. "Why?" "Because she restores buildings. You've spent 2 weeks telling us this is dangerous. The house isn't falling down." "Congratulations." Grant shoved his hands into his pockets. "Forget it." He walked away, but the question followed Eli through the afternoon. 28 windows was months of work. It would pay for roofing, maybe more. It would also make the barn dependent on the house that had consumed everything else. When he asked Mara, she did not deny the conversation. "I told him I'd have to inspect each opening. You're considering it. I consider paid work, with him. He has windows. I repair windows. That's how commerce functions. He wants the barn tied to the rental business. He wants many things. And you? I want enough income to put a roof over the frame after we take it down. Eli tightened the strap around a rafter harder than necessary. Mara watched his hands. You don't have to like a client. He's not a client. He's Grant. That distinction has cost your family a lot of money. The crane arrived on a Tuesday beneath a sky the color of dirty wool. Its operator, Len, positioned the outriggers while Mara, June, and Oscar checked every strap. The first surviving bent lifted at 9:18. 40 feet of chestnut frame rose from the barn in one dark shape, joints groaning as old weight changed direction. Eli stood at the tagline with rain working down his collar. When the bent cleared the foundation, the ground beneath it looked indecently bare. They lowered it onto cribbing. Eli checked every joint before covering it. The second bent came free near noon. The third had a carved tie beam hidden beneath boards and years of grime. A simple pattern of crossing leaves ran along one face. Not fine work, but deliberate. Eli had never seen it. Original? He asked. Looks like, Mara said. The western post attached to it had split near the base. They planned to brace the tie, cut the failed post free, and lower both separately. As Oscar removed the last siding, the remaining wall shifted. Out! Mara shouted. The top plate rolled toward the collapsed bay. The carved tie beam dropped 6 inches, caught on a broken mortise, and began pulling the split post inward. The crane line was attached but slack. Eli saw the tag rope beneath a pile of siding. He ran for it. Leave it! Mara yelled. If the tie rolled, the carved face would strike stone. Eli yanked the rope free, wrapped it once around the standing oak at the corner, and hauled sideways. The beam changed direction by inches. June reached the crane operator, circling one arm. The cable tightened. The wall came down with a deep, flat roar. Boards burst outward. The split post folded. Dust and rotten hay filled the air. Eli held the tagline until the carved beam lifted through the dust, swinging clear of the stones. Then Mara seized the back of his jacket and dragged him away from the settling debris. "What is wrong with you?" she shouted. He coughed, still gripping the rope. "We saved it. You ran into the fall zone. The wall moved sooner than you said. That does not improve your decision." The crane carried the tie beam to the cribbing and lowered it carved side up. The crossing leaves were intact. Everyone stood silent for a moment. Oscar whistled once. Eli looked at him. Oscar pointed at the fallen wall, then at Eli. "Fair," Eli said. Mara walked away before her anger could become something else. By sunset, 4 bents lay in numbered rows beneath temporary covers. The 5th had not survived. Its lower joints came apart in dark handfuls, leaving only the tie and one brace worth saving. The barn no longer sagged against the sky. It was gone. Eli stood where the central aisle had been, boots on the bare stone threshold. Without walls, the property looked wider and lonelier. The lighted bay remained at the east end, detached now from everything it had once supported. Mara stopped beside him. "You can still sell the frame," she said. He looked at the long, covered shapes beside the equipment shed. "Do you want me to?" "No." The answer came too quickly to be professional. Across the field, Grant switched on the farmhouse porch light. Warm squares appeared in the windows he wanted Mara to restore. Eli rubbed dust from the shallow cut in his palm. "When are you inspecting his windows?" he asked. Mara watched the house. "I haven't decided," she said. By the next afternoon, frost had hardened the ruts around the stacked frame. The foundation looked worse without the barn hiding it. Stones bulged along the west wall, and one corner had opened into a gap wide enough for Eli's hand. Cal Dwyer examined it with a steel rod and a face that suggested the stones had disappointed him personally. He was a broad, gray-bearded mason who had repaired the chimney at St. Luke's and refused to call anyone before 8 in the morning. He pushed the rod beneath the corner stone. "This section comes out." "How much?" Eli asked. 8 feet. "I meant money. I know. I'm delaying." Cal walked the perimeter, kicking loose mortar and naming problems in no useful order. Drainage, frost heave, shallow footing, roots. When he reached the eastern bay, he looked up at the tarp. "You working in there all winter?" "That's the idea." "Then your idea needs a wall." Mara stood nearby with her binder beneath one arm. "Can the old stone be reused?" "Most. Need gravel, drainage pipes, some new capstones. Labor's the bloodletting." He quoted $3,800. Eli laughed once because the other option was to sit down. Cal did not take offense. I've got 11 window sash in my shop that haven't opened since people wore hats to dinner. What kind of repair? Mara asked. Rot on 4 lower rails, ropes, glazing, weather stripping on all of them. That's more than 3,800 in restoration. Not if I do some of the stripping. Mara and Cal negotiated while Eli listened. The final arrangement exchanged foundation labor for window restoration, with each side covering materials. It still required money, but less than half the original quote. Cal held out a hand. Eli shook it. You're Raymond's boy, Cal said. Apparently. He still owes me a level. Take it up with Grant. I did. He gave me a laser thing. I don't want a tool that needs batteries to tell me water's flat. Cal left after marking the stones he planned to remove. Mara added 11 sash to the board beside Evelyn's completed table. The list of work was becoming a system. Ruth's cracked kneeler waited on a shelf. Beth's stool stood firm near the stove. 2 storm windows from a farmhouse down the road leaned against the east wall. Each job had a tag, a deposit, an estimate, and a place in Eli's notebook. The numbers still did not add up to a roof. Mara knew it. Eli knew it. They avoided saying so for 3 days. They repaired the first damaged chestnut post on the ground. Rot had consumed 14 inches at its base, but the wood above remained dense. Mara proposed cutting back to sound material and joining a new oak foot with a long keyed scarf. Eli drew the joint from 3 angles. Longer, Mara said. That leaves less original post. It spreads the load. So would replacing the whole thing. We're not replacing the whole thing. Why not? Because most of it has stood since 1937. Sentiment does not lower the cost of oak. She stared at him. He smiled. I listen sometimes. They spent a morning laying out the scarf. Every line had a meaning. Shoulder, slope, key pocket, waist. Mara made him mark X's on the material to be removed. This is not cabinet work, she said. You can't glue a strip back on if you cross the line. I know, say it. I can't glue a strip back on if I cross the line. Now say it like someone who believes consequences exist. He set down the pencil. You want to cut it? No, I want you to. The trust in that answer frightened him more than the joint. Before he could begin, Grant appeared at the bay entrance. Mara, you have a minute? She did not look up. About? The windows. I told you I'd get back to you. You said that last week. I've been dismantling a barn. Grant glanced at the rows of covered timbers. And now, it's dismantled. Mara's mouth tightened. Eli sharpened the saw, even though it did not need sharpening. Grant remained. Lacey's got bookings starting in December. We need to know whether to reglaze or replace. Don't replace original sash. That sounded almost like an answer. Mara turned to Eli. Start on the waist side. Stop before the shoulder. You're leaving? I'm inspecting windows. The saw stopped in Eli's hand. You decided. I'm deciding after I see them. You could have said that. I'm saying it now. Grant looked between them. It's a job, Eli. I know what a job is. Good. Mara removed her apron. I'll be back in an hour. It took 2.5. Eli finished the first rough cut, then stopped because irritation was not a cutting guide. He repaired Ruth's kneeler instead. When Mara returned, she carried a legal pad filled with measurements. How bad? He asked. Bad enough to restore, not bad enough to replace. Convenient. She placed the pad in her truck. I'm giving him an estimate. Are you asking me? If you want the work, say so. Do I want to repair 28 windows for the house he took while using the barn he didn't want? No one is using the barn. He asked about events. I told him no. You told him it was my decision? I told him it was a restoration shop. The words should have helped. Instead, Eli heard how easily she had defined a future they had never named. And the windows? The windows could pay for the roof. There it is. What? You decided what this place needs, then found a way to make Grant part of it. Grant owns damaged windows. That is the entire conspiracy. You could take any work. I can take the work in front of me. Raymond used to say that. Mara went still. Eli regretted it before the sentence finished, but regret did not retrieve anything in that family. She folded her apron over the workbench. We're done for today. Fine. He slept badly and woke to the sound of sleet against the camper roof. Mara's truck was gone. On the table sat the scarf joint drawing, weighted beneath the tiny misspelled mallet. She had left him a note. No cutting until we check layout. He read it twice, then carried the drawing to the barn. He did not cut. He spent the morning glazing one of Cal's sash, and the afternoon fitting Ruth's kneeler. When Beth came by, he asked if Mara had gone to the farmhouse. Beth hesitated half a second too long. What? She and Grant are going over an estimate. Today? I think so. How do you know? Grant asked me what we used to pay for window repair at the sugar house. Eli removed his apron. The farmhouse kitchen smelled of cinnamon and fresh paint. Lacey was filling glass jars with coffee beans for the rental rooms. Grant and Mara sat at the table with papers spread between them. The same table where the 3 Mercer siblings had divided the property. Mara saw him first. Eli. He looked at the papers. Estimate? Grant leaned back. 28 sash over 2 phases. Weather's too cold to strip all of them now. And I'd pay a deposit, like a client. Mara closed the folder. I was coming down after this. You signed it? No, Grant said. We agreed on the scope. Eli looked at her. Mara did not hide behind professional nouns this time. Yes. We agreed on the work. I was going to talk to you about whether you wanted to be part of it. After you agreed, the deposit buys roofing material. I didn't ask Grant to buy my roof. I'm not buying anything, Grant said. I'm paying for windows. You said you wanted events. That was an idea. You don't have ideas that stay ideas. Lacey put down a jar. Maybe everybody could lower their voice. No one did. Mara stood. The barn needs income. Cal's work gets the foundation ready. It doesn't buy rafters, metal, wiring, or heat. The windows are 6 months of reliable work. So you made the decision, I made a business decision. In his kitchen, pain flashed across her face before anger covered it. Where should I have made it? In the camper while you counted every dollar and pretended arithmetic was an insult? Grant pushed back his chair. I'm going outside. No, Eli said. Stay. You finally got everybody where you want them. Grant stared at him. You think I want this? I think you want the barn useful now that other people do. I want my windows fixed. And a venue. I dropped that. For now. Mara stepped between them without touching either. This is not about the windows. Eli looked at her. No, it's about you and a Mercer man sitting at a work table deciding what happens next, then informing me. The kitchen went silent. Mara's face changed. The anger left first. What remained was worse. I'm not your replacement, she said quietly. I didn't say you were. You've said it every day since I came back. Lacey turned away. Grant looked at the floor. Mara picked up her folder. I taught you because you asked. I used the bay because we agreed. I fronted money because the frame was worth saving. I have not taken one thing from you. You got the part of him that could teach. And you think that was gentle? At least he thought you were worth the trouble. Mara flinched as though he had struck her injured shoulder. Then she nodded once. The windows are Grant's problem, she said. The barn is yours. She walked past him. Eli followed her down the field. Sleet clicked against the folder under her arm. At the bay, she gathered her planes, chisels, and labeled hardware trays. Eli stood by the workbench, still angry enough to mistake stopping her for surrender. You don't have to take everything. You told me to stop deciding what happens here. I said, I heard you. What about the crane money? Pay it when you can. That wasn't the agreement, no. The agreement was that I use the shop. I no longer want to. She carried the first toolbox to her truck. If you leave now, he said, you're proving my point. Mara turned. No, Eli. I'm refusing to spend another 7 years trying to earn a place from a Mercer who punishes me for having one. She drove away with the church door trays rattling in the truck bed. The bay felt larger without her tools. Eli saw her note beside the chestnut post. No cutting until we check layout. He crumpled it, smoothed it again, then set the drawing over the timber. The scarf was already marked. The waist faces bore dark X's. He had measured them himself. Outside, sleet became snow. Eli picked up the saw. The saw entered Chestnut with a dry hiss. Eli guided it along the shoulder line, keeping the blade on the waist side. The timber was hard enough to resist without chattering. Fine brown dust collected against his glove. He stopped after an inch and checked the drawing. The scarf sloped across 3 faces. On paper, the joint was a clean geometry of load and resistance. In the timber, every mortise and old crack complicated it. Mara had marked the reference face with a triangle, then continued the mark around the post before Grant interrupted them. Eli found the triangle. He found the dark X. He cut deeper. Snow whispered against the tarp. The work lights made the flakes beyond the bay look like ash. At the halfway point, the saw began pulling toward an old peg hole. Eli corrected, withdrew the blade, and cleaned the kerf. His hands were steady. That felt like proof. He finished the shoulder cut, then made 2 relief cuts through the waist. The first block came free beneath his chisel. Sound chestnut shone where rotten wood had been. He set the block aside. The second required rolling the post. Alone, he could only turn it a quarter at a time, using a peavey and wedges. He shifted the cribbing, braced the timber, and leaned until the post rolled with a heavy thud. The reference triangle appeared on the new upper face, not continued, reversed. Eli stared at it. He grabbed the drawing. The key pocket was supposed to remain in the long tongue on the interior face. His cut had crossed it. He had removed the shoulder that carried the scarf under compression and left the weaker side intact. For several seconds, he tried to make the geometry become something else. He measured from the end, measured from the mortise, turned the drawing upside down. The numbers remained loyal to the mistake. To repair it, they would have to cut back another 22 inches, nearly 2 feet of sound chestnut, gone because he had preferred being angry to checking the layout with the person who drew it. Eli threw the ruler. It struck a steel post and broke at the folding joint. The sound disappeared into the open field. He kicked the waste block, then kicked it again. It rolled under the workbench. He swept his sketch pencil and coffee cup onto the floor. The cup hit chestnut and shattered. After that, there was nothing left to break that did not matter. He stood over the wrong cut, breathing through his teeth. Raymond's voice arrived without invitation. "What did you do now?" Eli shut off the saw, then the work lights. In the camper, he sat on the edge of the lower bunk wearing his wet coat. Snow ticked against the roof. The stove flame turned the metal cup of soup warm on one side and cold on the other. Someone knocked. The door opened before he answered, and Beth stepped in carrying a casserole dish beneath a towel. "You've got a light out. I turned it off. Is that philosophical or electrical?" He did not answer. Beth set the dish on the table. "Lacey made chicken and biscuits. Grant said you wouldn't eat it if you knew, so I was supposed to lie. You're bad at this. I know. What happened? Nothing?" She looked around the camper. "You have sawdust in your hair, blood on one knuckle, and you're sitting in the dark with cold soup. It's warm on the left." Beth waited. Eli stared at the floor between his boots. "I cut the post wrong." "How wrong?" "Not fix it with inlay wrong. Can it be fixed?" "Yes." She nodded. "Okay, it weighs 2 feet. Okay, it's chestnut. We can't replace it. Then that part's bad." He looked at her sharply. "That's all? What do you want me to say? That it's secretly wonderful you ruined it?" "I didn't ruin the whole post." "Then stop saying it like you did." She pulled the towel from the casserole and found 2 forks in the drawer. Eli did not move. Beth ate 1 bite standing up. "This is annoyingly good," she said. "Lacey cooks better when she's mad at Grant." "Why is she mad?" "The windows." He told her he was solving the barn problem. Eli laughed without humor. "There it is. He thinks if he pays you and Mara, nobody can say he took everything useful. Is that what you think?" "No." Beth put down her fork. "I think Grant hears accusation in furniture now." Snow slid from the camper roof with a soft rush. Beth opened the door again and brought in a wooden toolbox Eli had not noticed outside. Inside lay 2 molding planes, a draw knife, a brace, and a set of bench dogs wrapped in oily cloth. Where did those come from? Garage loft. Grant said the shop tools were divided. They were. He divided them toward himself. Eli picked up the draw knife. Raymond had ground one handle flatter after it split. "Did he know you took these?" "Yes. We had an adult conversation involving the word jackass." "Who called who?" "Shared vocabulary." She pushed the box toward him. "These belong with the frame." Eli set the draw knife down. Beth touched the edge of the table. "I laughed that day in the field." He knew immediately which laugh. "Forget it. I can't." It was a joke. It was Grant saying the thing we all knew would hurt, and me laughing so he wouldn't turn the silence on me. That's very dramatic for 5 seconds. 5 seconds is plenty of time to choose wrong. His eyes went to the dark barn window. Beth followed them. "Call Mara." She left. "You told her to." "I didn't tell her. You're all exhausting." She was making plans with Grant for paid work in the same kitchen where, I know where. Beth's voice sharpened. I was at that table too. I didn't stop Grant. I didn't make you come home. I didn't make Dad teach Mara. The room isn't doing this to you. Eli looked at her. Beth took her coat from the hook. Eat before the biscuits become weapons. After she left, he did. The casserole was better than he wanted it to be. Mara answered on the sixth ring. What happened? No greeting. She knew he would not call because he was lonely. I cut the wrong face. Silence. The chestnut post? Yes. How far? Through the shoulder and into the key pocket. Another silence. Longer. Did the blade cross the mortise? No. Any check below it? No. I need pictures. I want you to see it. You have a phone. I'm asking you to come back. For the post? To tell me how bad it is. And if it can be repaired. You said it can. I think it can. I don't trust myself right now. Mara breathed out. Did you get hurt? No. Did anyone else? No. Cover the cut. Keep snow off the end grain. I'll come at 7. She arrived at 6:45. Eli had the work lights on, the post cleared, and every drawing laid flat. He had taped over the mistaken triangle so he would stop wanting to blame it. Mara removed her gloves and walked around the timber without speaking. She checked the shoulder, the mortise, and the grain where the cut ended. She measured twice. Eli kept his hands out of his pockets. Finally, Mara said, 26 inches. I had 22. You need 4 more to clear this shake. He saw the hairline crack after she pointed to it. So, we cut back 26. We, if you're willing. Mara stood. We can fit a longer oak foot, different scarf. 2 keys instead of 1. The compression shoulder moves to the outside face. Will it be weaker? No. Stronger? If we execute it correctly. The qualification was deserved. Eli touched the fresh cut. It'll show. It was always going to show. Not like this. No, she said. Now it tells the truth. He waited for her to soften it. She did not. I'm sorry, he said. For the timber, for the kitchen, for making you answer for what he didn't give me, for acting like you stole it. Mara looked toward Raymond's pencil measurements in the alcove. He gave me things, she said. He also took. Eli remained quiet. The job I mentioned, she continued, the one before I left him. It was the Bellwether Inn staircase. I spent 4 months on the balustrade. Designed the repairs, matched the turnings, did almost all the fitting. At the final walkthrough, the owner thanked Raymond for saving it. He said, That's what we do. Eli heard the old plural. He didn't mention you, not once. Later, I told him I was leaving. He called me ungrateful. What did you say? That he confused teaching people with owning what they learned? The sentence sounded used, not polished, something she had carried long enough to wear smooth. When he called in May, Eli said, Did he apologize? No. He talked about the barn. He said it needed someone who could finish a thing. You thought he meant you. I thought he wanted me to understand he had finally found a way to ask without asking. What did you tell him? I told him to call his son. Eli looked at her. He said you wouldn't come. He never called. I know. The snow beyond the bay had turned blue with morning. Mara folded her arms. If I come back, this shop does not exist to finish Raymond's apology. I won't spend my life proving he was secretly good. Agreed, and Grant does not get to attach events, rentals, or family claims because he hires us. Agreed, and you don't get to decide I'm betraying you every time I make a decision you dislike. That one seems broad. It is broad. He nodded. Then decisions about the shop are mutual. Mara watched him carefully. What shop? The one we keep pretending is temporary. The word we remained between them without protest. I don't have money to repay the crane, he said. I don't have money for the roof. Cal's sash will pay for materials, not labor. Grant's windows would. You want the contract? I want to look at the estimate. If it's fair, we take the work. We don't take his conditions, even if he invents some later. He will? Then we'll say no later. A trace of a smile moved at one corner of her mouth. And my name goes on it, she said. The estimate? The shop. Eli thought of the faint Mercer name Raymond had painted over the barn doors years ago. Thought of Mara's hardware trays leaving in the truck. Mercer and Voss, he said. Alphabetical would put Voss first. Then you can pay for the V. She held out her hand. He looked at it. Is this legally binding? It's more professional than a grocery bag. They shook. Mara did not let go immediately. One more condition, she said. When you're wrong, you say it before destroying historic timber. That feels targeted. It's based on market research. They spent the morning redrawing the scarf. The new joint was longer and more complicated, with 2 oak keys passing through the chestnut and the replacement foot. Eli marked the 26 inches to be removed. This time, Mara made the reference triangle. Then she handed him the pencil. Eli traced it around all 4 faces himself. He checked every line against the drawing, rolled the timber, checked again, and marked the waist with dark X's. Mara stood beside the saw, but did not touch it. You ready? She asked. No. Good. He set the blade on the line. The second cut entered the post just beyond the first mistake. Fresh chestnut curled away, taking the ruined shoulder with it. Eli did not look away. The second cut took 26 inches of chestnut and most of a morning. Eli set the removed section beside the first waist block. Together, they showed exactly how the mistake had grown. 1 wrong shoulder, 1 corrective cut, 2 feet of timber that had survived storms, cattle, and Raymond, only to meet him on a bad night. Mara did not tell him to throw the pieces away. The new oak foot took 3 days to shape. Its scarf climbed the post in a long diagonal, meeting the chestnut across 2 compression shoulders. Eli fitted and removed it so many times that his arms began to recognize the weight before his hands did. On the final test, the joint closed beneath its own load. Mara crouched near the seam. Light. Eli held a flashlight against one side. No beam escaped through the other. She moved along the scarf. At the point of his mistaken cut, the new oak traveled farther into the old post than the original repair would have. The line was undeniable. Keys, she said. He drove the first oak key halfway, checked alignment, then drove it home. The second tightened the entire joint. A low wooden note passed through the post. Mara rested her fingertips against the chestnut. Stronger than it was, she said. Before the rot or before me? Both. They left the repair uncovered. No stain, no filler. Pale oak against dark chestnut, 2 keys visible on the face that would eventually stand near the shop entrance. Eli mounted the mistaken shoulder block over the workbench. Mara looked at it. Decoration, supervision. The farmhouse window contract was signed 2 days later at the same kitchen table where their argument had begun. This time, Eli brought his own folder. He had reviewed every opening with Mara, separated urgent sash from those that could wait, and divided the work into 3 phases. The estimate included labor, glass, weather stripping, paint, transport, and a paragraph stating that the contract granted no use or interest in the barn. Grant read that paragraph twice. This is because I mentioned events. This is because you mentioned things like, they've already been decided. I dropped the event idea, then the paragraph costs you nothing. Lacey stood at the counter labeling jars. Sign it, Grant. I'm reading it. You've been on the same sentence for 4 minutes. Beth sat beside Eli, invited by nobody and refusing to leave. Maybe he moves his lips internally. Grant looked around the table. I'm surrounded by support. You like support, Eli said. You're paying us for 28 pieces of it. Mara kicked his boot beneath the table. Grant signed. The deposit bought insulation for the temporary bay, materials for Cal's sash, and enough oak to repair 2 more posts. It did not buy a roof, but for the first time, the gap between what they had and what they needed could be described without laughing. Winter narrowed their lives to the lighted bay. They built removable walls from salvage siding and rigid foam, then hung moving blankets over the worst gaps. A small wood stove sat on concrete blocks, with its pipe running through a metal panel June fabricated. On windy days, the tarp roof breathed above them like a sleeping animal. Cal removed and reset the west foundation 8 feet at a time. Frozen ground slowed him. He complained about Eli's coffee, Mara's measurements, modern gravel, old stones, and the general laziness of gravity. In return, 11 window sash passed through Mercer Voss. The name began as pencil on Eli's estimate. Then Lacey ordered a rubber stamp without asking and presented it as a client relations necessity. Mara stamped everything slightly crooked because the imperfection bothered Eli. At night, they stripped paint from Grant's sash beneath infrared heaters. The old layers softened in ribbons, white, green, cream, a brief period of unfortunate mustard. Eli repaired lower rails while Mara cut new glazing points and complained whenever he aligned the labeled trays too precisely. On late nights, she slept in the camper's lower bunk. Eli took the upper. They argued about stove temperature through the thin plywood between them. Too hot, she would say. You can see your breath. My face runs cold. That's not science. Turn it down. He would not. She would get up and turn it down herself. An hour later, he would wake freezing and turn it back up. No one won, but by January each had stopped pretending the other might go home. The work developed rhythms that did not belong to Raymond. Mara handled structural decisions and client conversations that required saying no without apologizing. Eli scheduled jobs, tracked expenses, and made repair drawings clients could understand. They both cut joinery. They both swept. Evelyn sent a neighbor with a cedar chest whose lid had split. Ruth sent a restaurant owner with 12 battered chairs and no realistic deadline. Eli declined the chairs because there was nowhere dry to stack them. Mara watched him make the call. You just turned down money. We damaged the work trying to store it. Who are you? I'm learning consequences exist. By March, Cal's foundation stood straight and drained. By April, the repaired posts and 3 strongest bents were ready. The 4th frame had yielded braces, pegs, and 1 plate. Everything else was cataloged beneath covers for future furniture or repairs. The new footprint would be 36 feet long, small enough to roof, large enough for the shop, storage, and a narrow room along the east wall that Mara called the argument room. Classroom, Eli corrected. Same use. The roof estimate remained $9,000 beyond what they had. They could raise the frame and cover it temporarily, but leaving fresh repairs exposed through another winter would waste the work. Eli began calculating how many farmhouse sash they could finish before autumn, and how much of the roofing he and Beth could install themselves. Then Grant came down carrying a check. He waited until Mara turned off the planer before holding it out. $10,000, he said. Eli did not take it. For what? Roof. We're not billing phase 2 yet. It's not for the windows. Mara crossed her arms. Grant looked toward the prepared foundation. Lacey's bookings are strong. People ask about the barn. We could market workshops, dinners, small corporate weekends. Nothing huge. You dropped that, Eli said. I dropped pushing it before there was a structure. There still isn't. There will be. Grant placed the check on the workbench beneath the block from Eli's mistaken cut. For $10,000, I get 30% of the business and 6 event weekends a year. Mara's eyebrows rose. 30%. I'm providing capital. You're offering roofing money for a restoration company that already has work. Work isn't the same as growth. Eli stared at Grant's signature. 6 months earlier, Grant had given him a collapsed barn and called the division practical. Now, the same building had a percentage. You told me it was a liability, Eli said. It was. You told Mara to take whatever tools were useful. I was wrong. The admission came without excuse. That made it harder to dismiss him. Grant continued. I thought you'd sell the beams or leave them to rot. I didn't think you'd build this, so now you want part. I'm offering to help. No. You're offering to own the help. Grant's face hardened. You can't roof good intentions. No, but we can roof 36 feet instead of 60. We can reuse the straight metal, install it ourselves, and finish the back half when we can afford it. That will take years. Then it takes years. Grant looked at Mara. You understand business. Tell him. She did not look at the check. My name is on the business. My answer is no. You were ready to take the window job. We took the window job. You received an estimate and 28 repaired sash. That is what paying a business means. Grant's ears reddened. So, this is about punishing me. Beth's voice came from behind him. No. This is what it feels like when a decision isn't yours. She stood in the bay entrance with a coil of roofing harness line over one shoulder. Lacey was beside her, carrying a clipboard. Grant turned. Did everybody schedule this? I knew about the check, Lacey said. You said it made sense. I said ask. You heard yes because that saved time. Grant picked up the check. For a moment, Eli saw the exhaustion beneath his anger. The farmhouse payments, guest reviews, repairs, all the work of turning Raymond's life into something that supported itself. Grant had inherited what looked whole and spent every day discovering its cracks. We could have done this together, Grant said. Eli looked around the shop. We are doing work together. Your windows are over there. That's not what I mean. I know. Grant folded the check once. Good luck with the roof. He walked out. Lacey watched him cross the field. He'll be unbearable tonight, she said. Beth set down the harness line. Come to my place. You snore. So does Grant, but mine is less judgmental. Lacey followed him after a moment, leaving the clipboard behind. On it was a list of roofing suppliers and discounted sheets available from a contractor whose project had changed color. Eli touched the paper. She does research when she's angry, Beth said. The discounted metal was brown, not the charcoal Mara wanted. It also cost 40% less. They bought brown. The raising was set for the second Saturday in May. Cal agreed to lead one ground crew in exchange for the return of his restored sash. June brought harnesses and roofing tools. Oscar brought 3 people who understood taglines and, according to him, listened better than most relatives. Ruth organized food. Evelyn said she was too old to pull rope and arrived with gloves anyway. Grant did not answer Beth's first message. He answered the second with one word: maybe. The night before the raising, rain began. It struck the camper roof softly at first, then hard enough to wake Eli at 2. Mara sat at the table in her coat, reading the weather radar on her phone. Morning showers, she said. Wind under 10. We postpone, ground will be soft. That's not an answer. She looked at him. Do you want to postpone? No, neither do I. At dawn, the rain eased to mist. They walked to the foundation together. 3 repaired bents lay nearby, straps already placed. The new oak foot on the entrance post gleamed pale against wet chestnut. Eli put his palm over the visible scarf. Mara stood close enough that their shoulders touched. Still time to sell the beams, she said. You've been making that joke for 7 months. I like consistency. Vehicles began coming down the track before 7. Cal's truck first, then June's. Oscar arrived with rigging. Beth parked beside the camper and unloaded rain gear. Ruth brought coffee in metal urns. Evelyn carried a box of gloves no one had asked for. Lacey came alone. Eli looked past her SUV. He's checking guests out, she said. He knows what time we lift. The crane rolled in at 7:30. Not Len's full-size machine this time, but a smaller rental with enough reach for the 3 bent frame. Mara checked the outriggers. Eli walked every rope, every strap, every pin. At 9, the first bent rose. Rainwater streamed from the chestnut as the frame lifted from its cribbing. The repaired post hung at one side, its oak scarf exposed to everyone. Eli took the western tagline. Mara took the eastern. Across the field, the farmhouse door opened. Grant stepped onto the porch in work boots and an old raincoat, carrying Raymond's red-handled framing hammer. He started down the track as the bent swung toward the waiting foundation. Grant crossed the field without hurrying, though everyone else was shouting. The first bent hung above the foundation, rain darkening the chestnut. Eli leaned into the tagline as the lower end swung toward Cal's waiting crew. West 6 inches, Mara called. Cal guided the repaired post over its base. The pale oak foot hovered above the stone, turned, then settled into place with a heavy knock. Hold. Every rope went tight. Grant reached the foundation carrying Raymond's hammer. He looked at Eli across the upright frame. Where do you need me? Eli could have found several answers to that question, most of them years old. South brace, he said. Beth will show you. Beth tossed Grant a rope. Try not to own it. Good morning to you, too. They stabilized the first bent with long temporary braces. Oscar climbed a ladder and fixed them at the tie while June checked each base. The crane released its straps slowly. For one breathless moment, the frame stood under its own weight. The visible scarf remained tight. Mara pressed 2 fingers to Eli's back as she passed him. Not praise, not comfort. A check that he was still there. The second bent rose before noon. It carried the carved tie beam they had pulled clear of the falling wall. Cleaned but unstained, the crossing leaves showed along the interior face. Rain collected in the shallow carving and ran down like ink. A lower brace refused to seat. Oscar struck it with his mallet and whistled once. Helpful, Eli called. Oscar pointed to the mortise. The replacement peg hole was off by less than a 1/4 inch. Small enough to have vanished on a drawing, large enough to stop several thousand pounds of frame from coming together. The crane held the bent while rain strengthened. Mara climbed the ladder, checked the joint, and came back down. We lower it. We can draw bore it, Eli said. Not under load. Set it on blocking, adjust the hole, lift again. That's what lowering means. Right. Nobody laughed. Everyone was wet, hungry, and concentrating too hard. They eased the bent back to the ground. Eli knelt beside the joint, protected by a tarp Ruth and Evelyn held between them. He measured the offset, shaved the peg, and adjusted the oak insert without enlarging the original chestnut more than necessary. Grant crouched opposite him. Dad would have forced the peg, he said. He forced a lot of things, usually blamed the mallet. Grant turned Raymond's red-handled hammer in his palm. The handle had been replaced twice. Eli remembered shaping the second one, while Raymond stood behind him, saying it was too thick, too thin, too thick again. Why did you bring that? Eli asked. Grant looked at the hammer as if surprised to find it there. It was in my garage. Most of the shop was. Beth explained her view on that. She brought the draw knife back. She brought everything that wasn't bolted down. Eli adjusted the insert. Grant ran his thumb over the hammer handle. I wasn't trying to steal his tools. You were trying to keep the useful things. Yes, at least he said it. Eli held out his hand. Grant gave him the hammer. It fit Eli's grip exactly because he had shaped it for Raymond's. He drove the adjusted peg until its head met the frame. The joint pulled closed. Lift it, he called. The second raising went cleanly. By two, both bents stood braced against the gray sky. The third was the heaviest. Its tie held remnants of the old loft and one enormous iron hook nobody could explain. Mara wanted the hook removed. Cal insisted anything that survived 80 years deserved another chance. They left it. Halfway up, wind caught the frame. Taglines snapped tight. Evelyn lost her footing in the mud, but refused to release her rope until Ruth grabbed the back of her coat. Grant and Beth hauled together on the south line. Mara planted both boots and shouted directions over the crane engine. Eli watched the frame turn. "Give it west!" he yelled. The entire ground crew leaned. The bent came back into alignment by degrees. Its posts descended between the first two frames, tenons entering the waiting mortises in the plates. When the shoulders seated, the sound traveled through all three bents and into the foundation. A deep wooden knock, less like construction than recognition. The rain stopped. No one noticed at first. They were still fastening braces, checking plumb, and arguing over pegs when sunlight opened beneath the cloud line. It came across the wet field and caught the new oak foot at the entrance. By 4:30, the frame stood. Not a barn yet. No roof, no walls, no warm work lights. 3 old bents, repaired plates, temporary braces, and mud everywhere. The original building had been longer and taller. It had held cattle, hay, machinery, and Raymond's unfinished intentions. This one held 30 tired adults beneath a shape that had been absent that morning. Ruth opened the food. June sat directly on the wet foundation and ate 2 sandwiches. Oscar examined the western line, then gave 3 whistles. Mara looked at him. 3? He's emotional, she said. Grant stood beneath the carved tie beam, Raymond's hammer hanging from one hand. Lacey joined him and tucked her arm through his. Eli did not go over. There would be other conversations. He had finally learned that not every silence had to be repaired while it was still wet. The brown roof went on over the next 6 weekends. Beth learned to use a roofing harness and developed an unreasonable affection for the impact driver. June refused to let her carry panels in high wind, so Beth spent one entire Saturday measuring and complaining. Grant came twice without being asked. The first time, he worked beside Cal on the drainage trench. The second, he brought back the last box of Raymond's clamps and put it in the bay without announcing it. No check followed. The roof was mismatched where old corrugated sheets met new brown metal, but it held through the summer storms. Eli and Mara enclosed the front with salvage siding, then waited 3 months before buying enough new boards for the back. The classroom became storage, then a finishing room, then a classroom again when Ruth persuaded 6 adults from St. Luke's to pay for a Saturday repair workshop. The first class included a retired nurse, a cook changing careers, an accountant who owned 7 chisels and had never sharpened one, and Cal, who claimed he attended only to recover his level. Eli taught them to flatten the backs of their chisels. His instructions came out too fast at first. When the accountant rounded an edge, Eli heard Raymond's impatient breath gathering in his own chest. He stopped. "Here," he said, taking a second stone rather than taking the chisel from her. "Watch the reflection. It'll tell you when your angle changes." He demonstrated once, then let her try again. Across the room, Mara looked up from Cal's draw knife. She did not smile. She did not need to. Paid work filled the shop unevenly. Some weeks the benches held church windows, farmhouse sash, chairs, and a pump organ case. Other weeks they worried over the power bill and delayed buying lumber. Mara gave up her rented garage after the first winter. Eli replaced the camper's flat tire, but continued sleeping there until the shop had heat, and he could afford a room above Cal's workshop in town. Mercer Voss never became an empire. It became a schedule. Jobs came in, were assessed, tagged, repaired, invoiced, and returned. Deposits bought materials, classes paid for heat. Difficult customers were assigned to Mara, unless they confused bluntness with permission, in which case Eli took them. The blue-striped clamp remained in regular use. Grant's rental business slowed after the novelty faded. The farmhouse furnace failed in January, and 2 of the guest rooms sat empty most of February. He stopped talking about event weekends. One Tuesday, he came into the shop while Eli was fitting weather, stripping into the last phase of farmhouse sash. "You hiring?" Grant asked. Eli looked up. "For what?" "Work." "You have a job?" "I have a house that eats jobs." Grant knew how to reglaze windows. Raymond had taught him before Eli was old enough to hold a putty knife. He was not fast, but he was careful when nobody praised him for being in charge. 22 an hour, Eli said. 2 days a week. Grant's mouth shifted. "That's what Mara paid you. That's the rate. Do I get a family discount? You get family supervision." Grant accepted. Working beside him did not heal their childhood. It revealed why they had survived it differently. Grant filled silence with instructions because silence had once meant Raymond was displeased. Eli treated instructions like traps because they usually had been. They irritated each other with professional consistency. Still, windows left the shop square. 18 months after Raymond's death, Mercer Voss opened the completed front room on a cold, bright Saturday. Lacey made a sign, but allowed Eli to choose the typeface. Beth brought maple coffee cake. Ruth brought folding chairs even though nobody had requested seating. Evelyn brought her repaired table on loan for the refreshments and warned everyone about the squeaky chair. There was no ribbon. Eli and Mara opened the new double doors, built from salvage barn siding around insulated cores. People walked through the entrance beside the repaired chestnut post. Most noticed the pale oak scarf. Some asked about it. Eli told them the truth. "I cut the first joint wrong. We had to remove more of the original post and redesign the repair." He did not say it jokingly. He did not wait for anyone to reassure him. Above the main bench, the mistaken shoulder block hung beneath a small painted sign, "Check the other face." The words had become a shop rule. Mara used it when reading contracts. Eli used it when clients described family furniture as worthless. Beth used it whenever Grant claimed everyone agreed with him. Near the end of the day, Eli found Grant alone under the carved tie beam. The crowd had moved toward the finishing room, where Mara was demonstrating shellac. Winter sun entered through the high windows and laid long rectangles across the floor. Grant stared upward. "You kept the carving," he said. "Barely. I don't remember it being there." "It was covered." Grant nodded. For a while, they listened to the noises of the shop, cups on Evelyn's table, Ruth's loud whisper, Cal denying he had eaten a third piece of cake. "When we divided everything," Grant said, "I thought we were leaving you the one thing nobody would miss." Eli leaned against the bench. "You were." Grant looked at him. "The barn wasn't secretly worth more than the house," Eli said. "It was wet timber and a bad foundation. Most people would have taken it down. That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No." "Good." Grant rubbed one thumb against a nick in the red hammer handle, now tucked through his belt. "I did think you'd leave," he said. "So did I. What changed?" Eli looked at the benches, each scarred by work that had actually passed through them. Mara's measurements were chalked on a cabinet door. His repair drawings occupied a rack he had built from old siding. The shop was warm enough, though the stove clicked whenever the draft shifted. "We stopped asking what you thought it counted as," he said. Grant followed his gaze toward Mara. "You two going to keep correcting each other forever? That's the business model." Grant laughed. This time, Eli joined him. After everyone left, the barn settled into its evening sounds. Mara collected paper cups while Eli folded chairs. From the tool room, she brought Raymond's old canvas apron. They had found it months earlier beneath a stack of tarps, stiff with glue and missing one pocket. "Peg or box?" she asked. Eli took it from her. The apron smelled only faintly of Raymond now. Mostly it smelled of dust. He hung it on a peg near the entrance. Raymond's workbench still stood against the back wall, waiting. They had moved it 3 times during construction and argued over every location. Mara rested her hands on its scarred top. Where? Eli looked at the new doors, then at the square of late light falling just inside them. Here. They carried the bench together and set it near the entrance, damaged side facing the light. The blue paint on the clamp handle showed from across the room. Above it, the failed chestnut cut remained where Eli had mounted it. Beyond the open doors, the farmhouse windows reflected the last sun in 28 uneven squares. Mara nudged the bench 1 inch left. Eli moved it half an inch back. "Now?" she asked. He checked the space around it. "Now," he said. They let go.